Hey guys, tonight we step back into a world where nighttime isn't a single block of unconsciousness, but a layered experience of sleep, wakefulness, and quiet wonder. You're not scrolling your phone under the covers or fighting to fall asleep after midnight snacks. No, tonight, you're tucked under a wool blanket in a timber-framed cottage, in a village that smells faintly of smoke, moss, and damp hay. You listen to the wind creak through wooden shutters and the distant hoot of an owl. There are no sirens, no glowing screens, no all-nighters for tomorrow's meeting. You live in a time when darkness falls early and fully. The sun sets behind the thatched rooftops, and with it goes nearly all activity. There's no evening Netflix lineup, no buzzing nightlife, just the slow extinguishing of candles, one by one. It's the 1300s, maybe earlier, and the world outside is pitch black by the time supper ends. You probably won't survive this era's plague or dentistry. Let's be honest, but for tonight, you're here to sleep. Twice dot, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing where our sleepy little village stretches across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're wrapped in the silence of a medieval village as night settles like a heavy wool cloak over the world. No hum of electricity, no glow on the horizon. Darkness here is deep and total, broken only by the flickering yellow of a few window slits and the faint glow of oil lamps. You're lying on a lumpy straw mattress, stuffed inside a coarse linen sheet that smells faintly of soapwort and old ash. The walls around you are wooden, maybe daub and wattle, and the roof leaks slightly. When it rains, you hear the scuttle of a rat somewhere near the beams. It's fine. He's a regular. Outside, the village is asleep, or at least in its first sleep. That's right, this isn't the kind of night where you crash at midnight and drag yourself up at 7. No, you're living in a time when people slept twice each night. The first sleep? That one hits you fast and hard, usually an hour or two after sunset. You've eaten your boiled barley or lentil pottage, maybe tucked in a quick prayer, and you're out like a snacked goose. There's no real concept of bedtime. There's just darkness, and with it, an instinctual sense that the body should rest, and so it does. People in this era didn't need blue light filters or melatonin gummies. Night itself was the lullaby. You're already drowsy by the time the sun disappears behind the hills. And before you can even start an argument over who gets the warm spot by the hearth, your eyes are closing. This first sleep is deep. Historians think it lasted from about 8 or 9 p.m. until around midnight or 1 a.m., a good 4 hours of solid rest. It wasn't just peasants either. Everyone did this: farmers, monks, nobles, even the occasional bleary-eyed scholar huddled over a manuscript. The first sleep was a given, a cultural default. No one questioned it. There's something beautifully human in that. Your body isn't confused or rushed. It's simply, let's go. You sleep as people were meant to sleep, in sync with firelight, moonlight, and silence. The world is small now. Just your breath and the slow creak of the roof timbers shifting in the cold. You might hear a dog barking, or the slow hoot of a barn owl, or nothing at all, except the sound of your own heartbeat slowing with every breath. But this isn't the whole night. Not even close, because in a few hours, something curious happens. You begin to stir. Not because you drank too much ale, not because of a nightmare or a scream, but because that's how people slept in 2 shifts. No alarms needed. Your body just knows. And this is where the story really begins. In the centuries before gaslights and shift work, before night became a compressed commodity, there was a gentle middle of the night. A time of stillness, not quite sleep, not quite wake. This is when you'd rise, sometimes to urinate in a chamber pot, sure, but more often to be awake. For real, there's a name for this little midnight intermission: the watch, or simply watching. It lasted for an hour, sometimes 2. And what you did during it, that varied wildly. Some people prayed. Some people chatted with family. Others told dreams, or planned tomorrow's chores, or even crept outside under starlight to meet someone they weren't supposed to be meeting. We'll get to that later, but for now, you don't know this. You're still nestled in your first sleep. drooling into a scratchy pillow. Maybe dreaming of a three-legged goose with your neighbor's face. Medieval dreams were weird. There's no pressure to get it all done in one sleep. No stress if you wake up. No panic that you'll be a zombie tomorrow. The night stretches long. Forgiving, patient. A canvas for sleep that comes in waves. Strangely, historians only began piecing this segmented sleep theory together in the late 20th century. Before that, it seemed absurd. Who chooses to wake up in the middle of the night? Well, apparently, most of medieval Europe did. One researcher even found over 500 references to first sleep and second sleep in letters, diaries, legal texts, and medical manuals dating from the 8th to the 17th centuries. Which makes it even weirder that we forgot. But you haven't forgotten. You live it now. You're lying in the quiet of a time that knew sleep differently. That didn't force it, didn't shorten it, didn't shame it. Your mind is drifting now, slow and warm. The fire's glow is down to coals, casting orange shadows that pulse and flicker across wooden beams. The air is cool against your face, but your body is wrapped tight. Soon you'll stir. But not just yet. For now, you rest. You don't know exactly when you wake. There's no chime, no bell, no glowing clock beside the bed. Just a quiet shift in your body, as if something ancient in your bones remembers its time. You blink into the dark. The fire is nearly out. Just a faint red breath in the ashes. The air feels colder now. The blanket has slipped down. You pull it back up with sleepy fingers, but your eyes stay open. You're not startled. You're not groggy. Just gently awake. This is the watch, the sacred interval between the first and second sleep. And you're not alone. Outside, the village isn't bustling, but it isn't still either. Somewhere a candle is lit, a pot warms over embers, a rooster mumbles in its sleep. You hear a neighbor's cough, the shift of straw, the low hum of someone whispering a psalm through the wall. The night isn't over. It's just pause. In your little corner of the medieval world, this waking hour is oddly alive. You sit up slowly, swinging your legs over the edge of the bed. The floor is packed earth or rough wood, cold against your feet. You wrap a shawl over your shoulders and move toward the hearth. You aren't rushing. This hour is yours. The word watch doesn't quite capture it. It wasn't a vigil in the strict religious sense, though sometimes it was. It wasn't insomnia, either. This wasn't restlessness, but rather a culturally embedded moment of pause. A built-in breath in the long night. You light a stubby candle and watch its flame tremble. The air smells of smoke, tallow, and old bread. You break off a bite of yesterday's crust and chew absently. Your thoughts are quieter here, as if they know they don't have to compete with the noise of daytime. Across Europe, this middle-of-the-night wakefulness had different names in different tongues. In Latin texts, it's referred to as prima somni vigilia, the first sleep watch. In Old French, it's premier sommeil. Chaucer even mentions it. Monks across monasteries called it the nocturnes and wove it into their rigid prayer schedules. But for you, it's simply normal. You've always slept this way. You might use this hour to think. Not worry, not obsess, just think. The kind of thoughts that drift like smoke, never quite solidifying. You remember a dream about your father's old boots, about a fox with your mother's voice, about a flood of geese in the church nave. Which makes no sense, but somehow you understand what it meant. Sort of. Historians still argue whether this waking period had a physiological cause, perhaps. Our circadian rhythm is naturally biphasic, or whether it was entirely cultural, shaped by candlelight and a sky full of stars. Was it the body or the world that made it feel right? No one's quite sure, but you don't need to be. You just accept it. In this hour, people prayed. But not in the kneeling for hours way you might imagine. It was quiet, mumbled. Sometimes, just one line, repeated slowly, like a pebble rolled between fingers. Hail Mary, our Father. Hail Mary, our Father. Over and over until the rhythm lulls you back to drowsiness. Or not, if you're literate, and most in your time aren't you. Might read a psalter, a page of someone else's dreams. Illuminated initials wink up at you in the candlelight. You can't read long. The wax burns fast. But the slowness is part of it. Or maybe you simply sit with someone. It's not uncommon for couples to talk during this time, to whisper about fields or family or what the miller said last market day. It's a chance for connection in a world that rarely allows it during the hustle of sunlight. There's even evidence that some couples use this time to be intimate, but we'll get into that later. You're not in the mood. Too sleepy. Instead, you step outside, just for a moment. The door creaks. The village is hushed, blanketed by a sky so clear it feels like it could shatter. The stars above you are endless, cold, watching. Somewhere to the east, the moon hangs low and dull. You wrap your arms tighter around your chest. You can see your breath. There's a figure walking. Near the edge of the village, a shepherd, maybe. Or someone with a secret. Or just another soul in their watch. Back inside, the fire's glow is almost gone now. You stir it with an iron poker. Just enough to feel the warmth reach your fingers again. You sip a bit of leftover ale. Warmed slightly. It's sour but comforting. In cities, things were different. In London or Paris, the watch hour was a little noisier. People walked the streets, sometimes for work, sometimes for mischief. There were night guards. Bakers who started early. Prostitutes. Thieves. And the occasional lawman trying to keep it all in check. Court records show an oddly high number of disputes, fights, and arrests that occurred between midnight and 2 a.m. Apparently, the night wasn't quite so sacred in the city. But you're not in the city. You're here, in the dark, in the quiet, listening to the sound of your own heartbeat in a room that holds time differently. No screens, no scrolling. No shame in being awake. Modern scientists, those lab-coated types with too much coffee and not enough REM, have tested this kind of sleep. In one experiment, people were put in darkness for 14 hours a day. After a few weeks, their bodies naturally fell into 2 chunks of sleep with an hour or so of wakefulness in between. Like yours. It's almost as if our ancestors knew what they were doing. Imagine that, the candle gutters. The flame leans sideways and begins to shrink. You yawn. Your body knows what to do next. You return to the bed, shifting aside the blanket with the lazy grace of someone who isn't racing a clock. You slide under, pull the covers tight, and feel the warmth waiting there. This isn't insomnia. This is rhythm. Soon, the second sleep will carry you away. The second sleep doesn't crash in like the first one did. It drifts softly, like mist curling through the beams of the ceiling. You lie still, not forcing anything, not trying to beat the clock, because the clock doesn't exist yet. Just the inner tide pulling you back under. Outside, the village slips deeper into silence. Even the animals are still. The embers in your hearth have gone cold now, a soft gray layer of ash covering what was once fire. Your breath is slow. You pull the blanket higher, curl slightly, and let yourself dissolve back into the dark. Second sleep is gentler, stranger. The body is rested, half empty already. So what remains is lighter, dreamier. This is the sleep where the visions come, where the thoughts you started during the watch take root and grow strange leaves. You're not sure if you're awake anymore. You don't really mind. You dream of fields again, of blue flames on the river, of a child offering you a fish made of gold. You wake for a second maybe and think, well, that was weird. Then you're gone again. Historians still debate whether the 2-part sleep was universal or just common in Europe and parts of the Middle East. Some argue it may have been seasonal, stronger in winter when nights stretched longer. Others say it's a social construct, born of candle shortages and boredom. But evidence shows that people from all classes referred to it in writing: priests, merchants, midwives, farmers. Not in a clinical way. Just casually, as if everyone knew. First sleep, waking. Second sleep. You know it too. And while the first sleep was a collapse, the second is more like a float. You're suspended, weightless, in the hush of the late night. This is the time for deeper dreams, for messages from saints or warnings from devils, or sometimes just for really confusing metaphors involving geese and your landlord's eyebrows. In monasteries, this was when the last prayers of the night occurred. The monks, those tireless timekeepers of the soul, would rise again, sometimes, twice, to chant through the hours. Matins, lauds, breathing psalms into stone walls, half asleep but utterly devoted. Their night wasn't restful the way yours is, but it was structured. Theirs was a sacred rhythm. Yours is simply natural. Meanwhile, in your house, the dog sighs in its sleep. A floorboard cracks. The walls seem to breathe. In wealthier homes, the second sleep might involve silk bedding, feather mattresses, privacy. But even then, the rhythm was the same. Sleep, wake, sleep again. If you're a woman, and many of you listening might be, you'd perhaps use this quiet post-midnight window to feed a baby, check on a sick child, or ease aching feet. If you're lucky, you just rest. You have dreams like anyone else, but they might be interrupted by reality, crying, coughing, cold drafts. Still, this middle night split gave you a moment to collect yourself before sunrise demanded everything from you again. Men, too, had their rituals. A farmer might sharpen tools during the watch. A merchant might count coins. A husband might hold his wife's hand and not say a word. The intimacy of this hour wasn't always about action. Sometimes it was about not needing any. A shared silence. A presence. No rush. No expectation. And it's in the second sleep that the body repairs itself. This is where some historians believe healing occurred physically, emotionally, spiritually. Because the first sleep cleared the dust. The second, this one is deeper, slower, less disturbed by hunger or cold or urgent thoughts. It's no surprise that medieval physicians often referred to the divine hours of rest as being between the second and fourth watch of the night, roughly 2 to 5 a.m. That's when healing dreams came. When the body hums softly in tune with the world. Of course, medicine back then also involved bloodletting, leeches, and something called treacle that wasn't even sweet, so maybe take their advice with a pinch of salt and a dash of skepticism. Still, they knew that rest came in phases. They weren't dumb. Just medieval. You shift in bed. A sigh escapes without you meaning to. It's not discomfort. It's not quite comfort either. It's that strange weightlessness of late sleep. Like you're both here and not. And as you sleep, the village keeps its rhythm. A chicken stirs. A shutter groans in the wind. A man down the lane wakes from his own dream and writes something in the margins of his Bible, only to forget it by sunrise. The church bell hasn't tolled yet, but you know it will. Soon, because that's the next marker. The bell. The bell. Towers across Europe didn't just ring for drama, they rang to punctuate time. Especially at night. Matins, lauds, prime. Not alarms, exactly. More like heartbeat markers for an otherwise formless night. Even if you weren't religious, the bells told you where you were in the darkness. Some were muffled. Others cracked. Across stone courtyards with the force of a command. But all of them reminded people that even the night had structure. Your dream shifts. Now you're walking along a misty path, barefoot, toward a candle held by a goat in a bishop's robe. Don't think too hard about it. Dreams in the second sleep don't follow the rules. That's kind of the point. In modern times, we've forgotten what this was like. We've compressed sleep into one solid block, forced it into a tidy 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. mold, and we panic when we wake in the night. We label it insomnia. We take pills. We scroll phones. We assume something's broken. But back then, waking up at 2 a.m. wasn't a crisis. It was expected. The mind wasn't panicked. It was at peace. It was allowed to be awake. Your body turned slightly under the covers. You're not cold anymore. The fire may be out, but your core is warm. You've sunk so deeply into this second sleep now that the world outside has faded into fog. Not quite. Dream, not quite death. Something gentle in between. Second sleep doesn't last forever. But in this world, it's long enough to heal. Long enough to dream. Long enough to make peace with a world that, despite its leaky roofs, scratchy blankets, and occasional plague rats, still knew how to rest. You wake again, but this time, it's morning. The light has changed, not a flash, but a slow, creeping gray that seeps through the shutter slats and stretches across the walls like spilled milk. Birds are starting up outside. A dog barks once, and a cart creaks on the road beyond your cottage. The second sleep has done its job. You feel still tired, maybe, but in that good way, like your body's been somewhere and back again. You lie there a moment longer, blinking at the thatched ceiling. You can smell the damp of the walls, the stale breath of extinguished coals, and someone frying onions 3 doors down. Somehow, it's comforting. You are not rushed. The day begins slowly here. There is no snooze button, but there's also no need for one dot. It might surprise you, but segmented sleep wasn't considered abnormal at all. In fact, people made plans around it. Appointments, chores, spiritual routines. It was understood that a person might not be available in the middle of the night, but might be wide awake at midnight. That they'd drift off again around 2 or 3 and not rise until dawn finally pushed its way over the horizon. It was a sleep cycle built not on timekeeping, but on sensation. Historians still argue whether this was healthier than our modern sleep pattern. Some claim our bodies naturally crave biphasic rest, especially in darkness-rich environments. Others suggest it was a symptom of inefficient living, cold homes, poor nutrition, no insulation. But here's the thing, no one was mad about it. There's no medieval Karen writing to the village reeve demanding her sleep be more consolidated. You rise. Slowly, joints clicking like old hinges. You pull on woolen hose, a rough tunic, maybe wrap your hair with a kerchief. There's no mirror. You know what you look like. And you're not about to post it online. As you ready yourself for the day, you start to notice just how well everything fits this segmented rhythm. Breakfast, simple. A hunk of dark bread, maybe a little cheese if you're lucky. No Pop-Tarts, no oat milk, but it's filling. And you eat it in silence, the way people have for centuries. Your chores are waiting, but no one's pounding on the door. The day flows in the same rhythm the night ended with, gradual, not frantic. Segmented sleep wasn't just for the poor or the pious. Nobles did it too. There are records of 14th century court ladies rising between sleeps to write letters, braid hair, even sneak down quiet hallways for, let's call it recreational diplomacy. It was the hour of secrets, of hushed movements, of decisions made not by daylight, but in the privacy of pause. Imagine trying that now. A midnight work email, sent during your watch. Your boss would assume you were either drunk or broken, but in medieval life, perfectly reasonable. Even doctors of the time gave segmented sleep their stamp of approval. Though, let's be honest, these are the same guys who thought sneezing too hard might cause spontaneous tooth loss. Still, they recognized the benefits of this broken rhythm. They wrote about how the first sleep drains the bile, while the second clears the mind. You can't argue with that kind of poetic pseudoscience. In fact, there are entire medieval texts that divide the night into very specific sections. The Taqweenum Zanitatus, a health manual from the Islamic world that filtered into Europe, laid out the timing of food, bath, and sleep in careful detail. Sleep after dinner, rise in the middle, return to rest. And don't even think about eating cheese after the second sleep. Apparently, that's how demons get in. The point is, the night wasn't a void. It was a terrain mapped, known, inhabited, and now that you're fully awake, you start to realize how much we've lost. We've compressed the entire journey of sleep into a single shot. Go to bed late, get up early. No space for the in-between. No candlelit watch. No second drift. Just alarms, anxiety, and blackout curtains. But in this world, the one you inhabit tonight, there's no guilt in waking. No diagnosis. No insomnia label slapped on your brain. Just another part of the night. Another piece of your humanity. Your body is not a machine. It is not meant to run 8 straight hours and reboot on coffee. It is meant to ebb, flow, pause, return. The sun is almost up now. You hear footsteps outside. A neighbor. Maybe she's going to milk a cow, or maybe just wander the field for herbs. You stretch once more, spine popping like a dry branch, and then begin your day. But let's not rush out of it. Linger, just a little, in the memory of the night. The way the candlelight danced, the softness of the blanket, the strange, goose-filled dream. The hush that stretched between 2 pieces of sleep like the stillness between breaths. Let it stay with you. Because in a world that keeps telling you to sleep faster, wake sharper, and optimize everything, this old, strange rhythm of 2 sleeps is a quiet rebellion. And rebellions are always best whispered by candlelight. You're up now, boots laced well, tied with rawhide strips, and stepping into the soft morning mud. But we're not quite done with the night, not yet. Because to understand this ancient rhythm of two sleeps, we have to slip back again to the moment in between, when the world was neither day nor properly night. This strange hour, this watch, was when people were most alive with possibility. And what did they do with it? Well, turns out, a lot dot, you might think that in a world with no phones, no Netflix, and no espresso machine, people would have nothing to do at 1 a.m., but you'd be wrong. In fact, the middle of the night was a busy little hour if you knew where to look. Some folks prayed, sure, but others? Others wrote in their journals, stirred soup, or finished sewing hems. You didn't waste daylight on little tasks like darning socks. You did that now by candlelight, when the house was quiet and the air thick with wood smoke and wool dot. There are records actual. Dusty, Latin-laced records of farmers using this wakeful time to check on animals, to mend tools, even to sneak out and swap goods under moonlight. One account from 5th-10th century Norfolk tells of a man who used his wake period to copy sermons by hand for a local friar. He did it every night for 6 years. That's a long intermission. And sometimes people just sat, not thinking big thoughts, not being productive, just sitting with their own quiet. The kind of thing your mindfulness app charges $9.99 a month to simulate. Historians still debate whether this practice was truly voluntary or simply necessary. After all, nights were long. In winter, darkness could stretch from 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. That's 14 hours without daylight. You try staying unconscious for 14 hours without dreaming you're late to algebra class in your underwear. Some researchers think this in-between wakefulness was the only natural option, but it wasn't just necessity. It became tradition, ritual, a known shape in the fabric of the night. So much so that if you didn't wake up after your first sleep, someone might worry about you. Even doctors acknowledged it in their own medieval way. One French physician in the 1500s noted, "The sleeper who wakens in the middle of the night and thinks of sweet things may return to his bed lighter in spirit and stronger in body." Sweet things, indeed. Of course, not all sweet things were prayer or poetry. Let's talk about the other thing people did during the watch. Yes, that thing. If you were married, or if you had a particularly persuasive personality, the middle of the night was prime time for intimacy. The first sleep had removed the day's fatigue. The body was warm, awake, and relaxed. And this is true. Some church texts even recommended couples engage in lovemaking during the watch because the body was clear of digestion and more amiable to affection. Amiable to affection. Let's get that embroidered on a pillow. Now, whether people followed that advice depends on 1,000 things. Marriage dynamics, health, number of kids in the bed, more than you think, and the general temperature of the room, which was often approximately meat locker. But the fact remains, this segment of the night was alive. It wasn't wasted. It wasn't even sleepy. It was soft, strange, alert, a space between worlds. One you didn't have to justify. Some midwives timed deliveries around the watch. Some herbalists brewed teas and poultices under moonlight. In French rural villages, legal records show people testifying about events that occurred specifically between first and second sleeps. Break-ins, whispered confessions, secret meetings. It wasn't suspicious to be out of bed then. Just peculiar enough to be remembered. In one delightful account from the 1400s, a woman testifies in court that she clearly saw her neighbor sneaking over to borrow a prized chicken, because she herself had risen during her wake period to pee in a bucket and happened to look out the window. Case closed, poultry recovered, justice served. Even storytelling had its place. Some families used this hour to pass down oral tales. Not the big sagas, those were saved for long winter nights, but smaller, sleepier stories. Ones you could tell in a whisper, just before sleep returned. Tales of little miracles. Of bread that never ran out. Of the dog that once spoke Latin to a bishop. Normal things. And the best part? No one was in a rush. There was no productivity guilt. No pressure to optimize your wake time. No glow of a screen. You weren't wasting anything. You were just living inside the night. And then, when your eyelids grew heavy again, you simply went back to sleep. There was no anxiety about it. No tossing. No clock watching. No tapping on a phone to check how many hours were left. You didn't measure. Sleep, you entered it, like a familiar river. So, here's a little thought experiment. What if your body is still trying to do this? What if every time you wake at 2:15 a.m. and stare at the ceiling, it's not you failing sleep, but 1,000 years of human rhythm trying to make a comeback? Maybe that's not brokenness. Maybe that's memory. Maybe your nervous system is whispering. This is the part where we light a candle, sip some broth, and stare at the fire for a while. But instead of a candle, we scroll. Instead of broth, we doom scroll more. Instead of surrendering to the watch, we panic and count the hours until the alarm. But not here. Here, in this quiet, sagging bed, you let it be what it is. A rhythm older than clocks, older than mattresses, older than most of the things we think of as normal. You yawn, you stretch, you scratch your nose and flop onto your other side. You don't need to understand everything. You just need to be here. In the space between sleeps. You sit by the hearth again, eyes still half-lidded, candle flickering beside you like it's trying not to fall asleep either. Your fingers fumble with a bit of old cloth. You're not mending anything, really, just moving the thread through your hands. It gives your waking mind something to do while your body waits for the second drift. But let's talk about that flickering candle. Because here's the thing. In the Middle Ages, light was luxury. Especially at night. Candles, real candles, made of beeswax, were expensive. More than most villagers could afford. You didn't light one for fun. You didn't burn through 3 just to read the same psalm twice. If you had a candle at all, you used it carefully, reverently. And if you didn't, well, you just learned to live in the dark. This made the watch hour incredibly atmospheric. The world wasn't lit, it was shadowed, muted. Your night waking wasn't bathed in warm overhead lighting and backlit screens. It was soft, faintly orange, or sometimes nothing but silhouettes and sounds. Some households used rushlights, strips of dried rushes soaked in animal fat, cheap and fast-burning. They sputtered and smelled awful, but they worked. Sort of. Just don't try reading by one unless your favorite hobby is going blind. The wealthy had beeswax candles, of course. They burned cleaner, brighter, and smelled like expensive church air. Nobles might place several in ornate holders and let them drip wax into polished bowls. Sometimes they were dyed red or blue, though that was mostly decorative and probably a sign that you were trying to impress someone or ward off someone. Either way, it cost you. Monasteries had a system. Candles were rationed, timed, and recorded. A monk wasn't just burning wax, he was burning the abbey's budget. Some orders even had candle height rules, like, you can read until the flame is an inch tall, then it's bedtime, Brother Thomas. Which probably explains the mysterious scorch marks on a few manuscripts. Somebody didn't want to stop. Historians still argue whether people truly needed these candles, or whether the ritual of lighting one was part of the point. A candle meant the watch was happening. It was both tool and symbol. The moment you lit it, the night became yours, and that's something we forget in the age of 100-watt light bulbs. Darkness used to matter. It used to have meaning. Light was not a switch. It was a decision. Imagine walking into your kitchen now and flipping on the light, and realizing you just spent half a day's wages. That's what lighting a candle could feel like. It made people more intentional, more selective. No one left lights on just in case. The night had to earn its glow. So during this wakeful hour, most people didn't bathe in light. They nursed it. One candle, maybe, or none at all. You might find your way to 2. The hearth by memory. You might sit in the soft red shimmer of dying coals. The glow of firelight was free, after all, and its flicker told stories on the walls that you didn't have to write down. Just watch. In some villages, it was customary for a family to share one candle between 2 or 3 rooms. They'd take turns. You'd hear a knock on the wall, bring the light, and someone would come, shielding the flame with a cupped hand, to lend it to you for 10-15 minutes. And if your candle went out, you had to relight it from someone else's. That flame had lineage. It had traveled. Like stories. The candle economy extended even to sleep rituals. Some believed that snuffing a candle right before second sleep sealed in dreams. Others thought blowing one out too fast could anger spirits lingering near the flame. Because of course there were spirits. It's the Middle Ages. Everything had a ghost. Even the act of watching the flame had significance. Try it now. Picture yourself watching a small medieval taper burn. The way the wax softens, leans, pools. The smell half sweet, half animal. The way the flame dances as if it knows you're watching. The room glows in a circle around it, and beyond that, darkness hums quietly, not menacing, just present. Now imagine that's your only light. Suddenly, you see why people didn't just stay up for hours. That glow had to be conserved. If you let it burn too long, you might not have enough wax to light the next night, or the night after. Even today, when people try recreating segmented sleep patterns, they often report something curious. When they do it in full darkness, not with a phone light, or even a hallway bulb, the waking hour becomes incredibly peaceful. Time stretches, thoughts slow down. The brain, used to constant illumination, finally stops blinking. That's the magic of the candle economy. It made the dark something to dwell in, not something to banish. It's also why superstition wrapped itself around light. Some believed that staring too long into flame opened your mind to spirits. That the watch hour was when souls passed through. That if you lit a candle and spoke the name of a dead loved one, you might hear them in the creak of the rafters, or see their face flicker in the wax strips. Others believed certain candle shapes foretold fortune. A flame that bent to the left meant visitors. A blue flame meant weather. A guttering flame? Someone in the village had just died. Again, no science, just stories. But stories are what we burn our fears into. You sit now, candle in front of you, the wick curling and hissing slightly. You don't need it for long. Second sleep is already tugging at the back of your mind. The flame wavers once, twice, then steadies. And in that circle of flickering orange, you breathe in deeply, eyes closing. There is no clock here, no deadline. Just fire, darkness, and dreams waiting to be lit. The candle burns low now, its pool of wax trembling like it knows its moment is nearly over. But before you blow it out and tumble into your second sleep, let's step outside the house. Quietly, careful not to wake anyone. Because as sleepy as this village might seem, the night isn't fully still. In fact, for certain folks, it's just getting started. You tug on a cloak scratchy wool, smells faintly of lanolin and wood smoke, and slip through the creaking door into the open air. It's darker than you expect. The moon has vanished behind clouds, but your feet know the path. The way the ground slopes gently toward the well, the sound of wind stirring straw roofs, the feel of cold stone beneath your solace. You pause, listen. Then you hear it. Someone else is awake. Down the lane, a soft shuffle of feet. Maybe a low cough. A door opens just a crack and then shuts again. Another candle flickers behind thick glass. This is where you begin to see it. Midnight was not just a time, it was a community habit. A rhythm baked into the bones of daily life. Different people, different roles, but all participating, knowingly or not, in the strange nocturnal choreography of a world without electric light. Let's say you're a peasant, a farmer. The first sleep gave you the deep rest your body needed after hours in the field. But this watch hour, it's yours. You might check on livestock, run your hands along a fence that needs mending, or grab a piece of leftover bread. Nothing big, just enough to keep the rhythm going. Now imagine you're a priest. You wake to the sound of bells, real or internal, and shuffle to the chapel. You chant softly in the dark with a handful of other sleepy souls, breath misting in the cold. Stone nave. This hour is sacred, liturgical. You're not tired, exactly, you're suspended. In devotion, in repetition, in rhythm. The Psalms never sounded so sleepy or so sincere, but what if you're a tradesman, a blacksmith, maybe, or a cooper? You wouldn't fire up the forge at 2 a.m, not unless you wanted angry villagers at your door. But you might check tools, sketch designs, whisper ideas to yourself, the way some folks sing in the shower now. It's not about output. It's about having a moment that isn't owned by anyone else. And women? Let's not forget them. The night watch could be a reprieve, a moment to exhale, to rub tired feet, to nurse a baby, check on a sick parent, or simply sit with the stillness. In a world that demanded near-constant movement during daylight, this hour gave permission to stop. Not to sleep, but to be still. Even children were sometimes included. A mother might whisper stories in this hour, half lullaby, half lesson before they drifted into second sleep. Sometimes this was when secrets were shared, or confessions, or plans, because the watch hour was also private, not hidden necessarily, but shaded, discreet, which brings us to another kind of midnight task, the sneaky kind. Not everyone who moved through the village at 1:30 a.m. had prayer or poetry on their minds. There are letters, court records, and the occasional scandalous poem that suggest this was prime time for clandestine meetings. Lovers climbing through windows, spouses returning suspiciously late from checking on the pigs, neighbors whispering beneath trees. Historians still argue whether this was widespread or exaggerated. Did people really use the watch hour for romance and mischief? Or are we just projecting modern drama onto medieval routines? Well, when a 14th century court record lists a man caught sneaking into his neighbor's house between the first and second sleeps, and the neighbor's husband was away in Calais, let's just say the dots connect themselves. And the funny thing is, this wasn't even taboo in the way you might expect. There were rules, yes, but also winks. People understood that the quiet of the watch could lend itself to privacy. And in a world where almost nothing was private, no bathrooms, no bedrooms, no alone time that mattered in towns, this hour had more structure. Watchmen patrolled the streets. Their job wasn't just to stop crime, but to call out the hours to check on fires and to be seen. It was said their presence discouraged thieves, which sounds reasonable. But some nights, it probably just annoyed people trying to sneak around undetected. In one 13th century London record, a watchman was fined for falling asleep while leaning on his staff and being relieved of duty after villagers discovered him snoring through a robbery. We've all had rough nights, sir. There's even evidence of night markets, very small ones, where folks exchanged bread, herbs, or firewood. During the wake period, quiet barters tucked in between yawns and lantern light. And then, of course, there were those who simply wandered, not lost, just thinking, dreaming, stretching their legs. If you passed one of them, you didn't say much, maybe a nod, a murmur. The night didn't like loud voices. And then, slowly, it would pass. The watch would fade. Candles snuffed, boots removed, windows latched. People would crawl back under furs and blankets and let the second sleep take them, but they wouldn't. Forget the hour they just had, because for many, it was the only time they truly owned. Not dictated by work or worship or family. Just a thin ribbon of darkness, strung quietly between the two halves of a life. You walk back to your own bed now, the frost crunching slightly beneath your feet. The door clicks behind you, the fire is completely out. The room is cool. You blow out the candle. And in the soft darkness, you think, just before sleep folds over you again, that was mine. You're not even fully asleep again before your mind starts drifting sideways into dreams, into shadows, into a space that's not quite real, but certainly not empty. But tonight, something's different. The dreams aren't gentle stories, or strange metaphors with animals and hats. No, tonight they come vivid, strange, shimmering at the edges. You dream of bells ringing underwater, of your mother sewing a shirt made entirely from feathers, of a door that opens onto a forest, made of bones. Welcome to the dreamscapes of the Middle Ages. If first sleep was the body's rest, and the watch was its waking breath, then second sleep was the soul's playground. A place where dreams were not just dreams. They were messages, visions, omens, sometimes divine, sometimes dangerous. Medieval people didn't shrug off dreams like we do now. They didn't Google them. They lived them. Woke up whispering them to whoever was nearby. Or, more often, kept them secret, folded them into the back pocket of their mind in case they ever came true. You stir slightly on your straw mattress, the dream fading but not gone. Maybe you even sit up again, just for a moment, eyes wide and heart thudding, not with fear, necessarily, but with that strange awareness that your mind just showed you something it didn't invent. Because in the Middle Ages, people believed dreams weren't just internal. They were bridges, messages from God, perhaps, or from darker places. Sometimes they came from saints, other times from demons. Some even thought dreams were your soul leaving your body briefly to roam and witness things it shouldn't. There's a whole tradition of dream books manuals that try to decode this midnight madness. They list dreams alphabetically. To dream of bees means good fortune. To dream of fire means conflict. To dream of teeth falling out, well, good luck with that one. Of course, some dream interpretations made zero sense. 2. Dream of sheep running backward means your cousin will marry someone with a limp. That's either oddly specific or someone had a very strange dream once. Historians still argue whether people genuinely believed every dream had meaning, or whether the act of talking about them simply gave people comfort. Either way, dreams were a part of night that couldn't be ignored, especially the second sleep dreams. These were known to be deeper, weirder, more potent. First sleep was said to clear the body. Second sleep, that's when the soul wandered, and you didn't always like where it went. Some dreams were nightmares, visions of hell, of fire, of teeth and blood and drowning. In a time when the church painted eternity in terrifying detail, even one bad dream could send you to confession the next morning. It's not uncommon to find diary entries from monks or noblewomen where they record a dream with shaking hand. A red crow flew across the moon. It did not speak. I fear it was a warning. You don't need a modern therapist to unpack that. People might wake from these second sleep dreams in a sweat. Sit up, pray, whisper to the dark. Not because they believed dreams were fake, but because they were convinced they were true. Or at least, true enough to matter. And yet, dreams could also be gifts. There are reports of saints appearing to the faithful during the second sleep, offering reassurance, healing, or instructions. One 13th century nun claimed Saint Agnes visited her and told her exactly where to find a missing relic. The next day, she dug beneath the chapel floorboards and found a silver pendant. Coincidence? Maybe. Maybe not. Depends how much candlelight you're willing to bet on it. Even ordinary people believe dreams could carry answers. Farmers might dream of when to plant. Midwives might dream of which herbs would ease a difficult birth. One apothecary, supposedly, dreamed of a recipe for treating melancholy made from elderflower and powdered frog's tongue. Not sure how well that one sold, but it wasn't all fear and prophecy. Some dreams were romantic, longing, tender. A widow dreaming of her husband's hand on her cheek. A baker dreaming of a kiss that never happened. A shepherd dreaming of music no one had taught him. These weren't just dreams. They were echoes, preserved in second sleep, softer than memory, sharper than hope. Even dreams that didn't make sense had value. The sheer act of dreaming reminded people that something in them still stirred, that the soul was not stagnant, that it was trying, in its own strange vocabulary, to speak. And when they awoke, some wrote them down, others painted them. Some told no one. A few walked to the nearest chapel and lit a candle, not for clarity, but for peace. You stir again. Half asleep, half aware. You try to hold on to the dream about the tower made of feathers and bells. But already it's melting. That's okay. In the medieval world, you wouldn't be told to analyze it. You'd just feel it. Carry it like a stone. In your pocket. Heavy and real, even if no one else can see it. And if it came back the next night, well, maybe it wasn't done with you yet. Because that's the thing about second sleep dreams. They come back in pieces. In whispers. In the twitch of an eye or the shiver in your chest when the morning wind sneaks through the shutters. They leave footprints, even if you don't remember the walk. You pull the blanket up tighter. There's a breath of cold in the room now. The last hour before dawn. Your soul, if the old books are right, has just returned from wherever it wandered. And, for now, it's home. The dream lingers like the last note of a song, faint, unfinished, impossible to hum, but impossible to forget. You turn slowly in your bed, eyes not yet open, and the room feels heavier somehow, not in a bad way. More like it's full of meaning. That hasn't spoken yet. And for a moment, you don't know if you're still dreaming, because this hour, this strange, floating hour before the second sleep ends, is when reality and dreams start to braid together. The lines blur. You remember the tower from your dream. Or was it a real place you visited once? Maybe neither. Maybe both. This is the liminal space, the soft gray time before morning, where nothing is quite solid, and everything feels like a secret. Back in the Middle Ages, people paid attention to this space. In a world ruled by signs and symbols, the time between second sleep and sunrise was considered ripe for messages. Not big, booming revelations, those were for saints and prophets, but quiet truths, gut feelings, gentle nudges, the kind you feel more than know. Some people even believed that if you asked a question before falling into second sleep, the answer would come in a dream before dawn. Not a sentence, not a scroll from the sky, just clarity, a feeling in your chest that said yes or not yet. It's not so different from the way we wake now. Sometimes knowing the solution to a problem we couldn't fix last night. A decision made somewhere behind your conscious mind, as if part of you kept working while the rest rested. Only in the medieval world, they didn't call it subconscious processing. They called it listening. To the soul. To God. To the quiet. Historians still argue whether this belief in pre-dawn wisdom was widespread or just held among certain religious orders. But it pops up everywhere, in letters, in legal records, even in architecture. Some abbeys were designed so that a monk could lie in bed and see the first light hit the far wall, signaling both morning and divine approval. Imagine that. Your bedroom designed to catch the exact moment of truth. But back to you're awake again. Not fully, just enough to know the second sleep is thinning. You stretch your legs, feel the scratch of linen on your calves. The coals in the hearth are long dead. The candle from earlier has burned down to a stumpy nub, wax hardened and lopsided. Curled. You could rise now, technically, but no one expects you yet. The village hasn't stirred, no footsteps, no rooster, just the soft breathing of walls and wind and wool. So you lie still, not sleeping, not waking. Just being. Some philosophers of the time believed this state was the most honest version of a person, not distracted by tasks, not distorted by hunger or fear, just you, suspended between worlds. And it's in this time that thoughts arrive slowly, like mist curling under a door. You think about the chores waiting. You think about that argument with your cousin last market day, about the joke the tanner told that you didn't laugh at but still remember, about the piglets born last week, one with a spot shaped like a crown. And then your mind slides sideways again. You wonder about the dream. Was the tower a warning? Was the feathered path some kind of message? Did the owl speak? You can't quite recall, but the feeling remains, soft as a bruise, familiar as your own breath. You turn over. In some parts of medieval Europe, people believed this in-between time was best for praying. Not out loud, just silently. Thoughts offered up like steam from hot bread. Simple, incomplete, full of wanting. Others used it for planning. Quiet lists made in the head, never spoken. You might hear someone mutter the day's tasks as they rise, fix fence, check cheese, sweep floor, feed goat. Don't forget to ask the baker's wife about that thing. A sleepy mantra, half prayer, half to-do list. But most people just let it be. There's a strange wisdom in that. In not trying to use every second. In not filling the silence with noise. In not needing your mind to do anything clever or impressive. Just lie there. Let thoughts pass like clouds. Let the breath come. In and out. If you were a monk, the bells would call you soon. Prime or lauds depending on the hour. You'd rise stiff and quiet and shuffle barefoot through the cold stone halls. But you're not a monk. Not tonight. You're someone who gets to stay in bed just a little longer. You hear it then. Far off. A sound you've been waiting for but didn't know it. A rooster. It crows once. Not urgently. Just enough to announce that something is about to change. Morning is arriving. Not fast. Not all at once. But you can feel it in the soft shift of color behind the shutter. In the hush that's about to lift. In your bones. Second. Sleep is loosening its grip. You yawn. A big one. The kind that starts in your spine and ends in your fingertips. You might close your eyes again for a minute. Or 5. You might not. But either way, the night is ending, and you were there for all of it. The first collapse into sleep. The candlelit hour of breath and thought. The dreams that clung like dew And now, this. The slow return, you didn't rush. You didn't miss it. You lived it. And somewhere, deep in your brain, or maybe your heart, your body knows this was right. That this rhythm, strange as it may seem to modern minds, is older than clocks, older than lamps, older than your alarm. It's the rhythm of dark and flame and breath and stillness. It's the rhythm of you. The sun still isn't up, not quite, but the color of the light is changing, shifting from inky black to that soft iron gray that only comes before dawn. You sit up slowly, the blanket falling to your lap, and for a moment, you just watch the room reshape itself around you. Shadows retreat, walls reappear. The familiar roughness of the wooden beams overhead feels like a reassurance. You're in your bed, in your home, and the second sleep is over. But what exactly did you sleep on? Because for all our talk of rhythms and candles and dreams, we haven't yet addressed the thing your body actually spends the whole night draped across: your medieval bed. Or, well, your sleeping situation, which might not always qualify as a bed by modern standards. Let's take a look around, shall we? If you're lucky, middle class lucky, we're talking you've got what's called a rope bed. Picture a wooden frame with a lattice of thick ropes woven across it like a giant, badly tuned tennis racket. On top of that, a mattress, though calling it a mattress might be generous. It's likely a large linen sack stuffed with straw, hay, or feathers. Depending on your income level and your allergy tolerance, feather beds were prized, of course. Soft, warm, and prone to clumping into weird lumps just when you least wanted them to. Straw was the default for most folks, and while it sounds rustic and romantic, it creaked, poked, and occasionally housed a few uninvited guests. Yes, I'm talking about bugs. You knew it was coming. You may have heard the phrase sleep tight. Well, here's your quirky tidbit of the night that actually refers to the rope lattice of a rope bed. Over time, ropes would sag, turning your mattress into something resembling a medieval hammock. So each evening, or during your midnight watch, you'd tighten the ropes with a bed key. Hence, sleep tight. Cozy, right? Now, if you're less lucky, you might be sleeping on a wooden platform with a layer of rushes and maybe a wool blanket. And if you're really down on your medieval luck, you're just curled up in the corner on the packed dirt floor, using your arm as a pillow and a dog for warmth. Dogs were not pets, they were insulation. Still, no matter where you laid your head, you likely shared your bed. Beds were communal spaces. A whole family could pile into one, parents, children, a baby, maybe even a cousin or servant. Privacy was not a medieval value. Warmth was. And with heating limited to whatever you could burn in the hearth, sleeping together wasn't just convenient, it was survival. In taverns or inns, strangers might share beds too. It wasn't unheard of to bunk with someone you just met, so long as they had most of their teeth and didn't snore like a warhorse. There are records of travel diaries noting a peaceful rest shared with a merchant from York who spoke only of sheep and knew no songs. Honestly, could be worse. Historians still argue whether this kind of sleeping arrangement fostered stronger communities or just gave rise to an entire genre of complaints. Either way, it shaped the way people understood intimacy, space, and rest. A bed wasn't a fortress of solitude. It was a hearth of shared experience, which brings us to bedclothes. You're not sleeping in pajamas. Those haven't been invented yet. You're likely sleeping in your undertunic, a long linen shirt that serves as both daywear and nightwear. Or, depending on the season, maybe nothing at all beneath the blankets. Layers were precious. Laundry was rare. You wore what made sense. Blankets, wool, heavy, scratchy, but warm. If you're wealthy, you might have fur-lined quilts or embroidered bed curtains to block the draft. Imagine pulling thick red velvet drapes around your bed to make your own personal sleep cocoon. Elegant, musty, full of spiders and pillows. You'd probably have one, but it wouldn't be memory foam or goose. Down in a 1,000 thread count case. More like a firm cloth sack with whatever stuffing you could manage: feathers, wool scraps, maybe moss if you're rural and resourceful. Your bed is not just a place to sleep. It's also your chair, your prayer mat, your storytelling couch, and your sickbed. It's where babies are born and people die. It's where the firelight flickers across your face while someone whispers a tale about a knight who turned into a tree. It's where you lie during the watch and stare at the ceiling beams, counting creaks instead of sheep. And most importantly, it's where the rhythm happens, because everything about these beds, the sag, the creak, the chilling courage segmented. Sleep. You didn't toss and turn wondering why you couldn't stay asleep for 8 hours straight. You just accepted it. When the rope slackened or your straw poked you in the back, you got up, did something, went back to bed. It wasn't a problem. It was the pattern. Compare that to today, when a $1,200 mattress promises to cradle you into REM heaven, and still, you wake up at 3 a.m. convinced you're broken. But back then, waking wasn't failure. It was expected, designed for, even. The architecture of sleep allowed it. So you shift now, in your rope bed, the mattress making a soft crunch beneath you. You feel the night draining slowly, the chill still wrapped around your toes. You think of how different the world feels in this little space. No alarms, no clock face blinking red at you. Just the sound of someone stirring in the next room. Maybe your mother, maybe your brother, maybe the neighbor you're not supposed to talk about. It's a bed, yes, but it's also a portal to rest, to dreams, to secrets told between the first and second sleep and remembered long after the rooster crows. You reach for the blanket. Again, pull it close. And as the gray light creeps across the wooden floor, you let your eyes fall closed one last time, not because you're tired, but because that's what beds are for. You're still in bed, but something in the air has changed. A pressure. A quiet that's just a little too quiet. And then cree. That's the sound of someone walking across the room above you, or beside you, or possibly over your head, depending on the creative layout of medieval homes, because in this world, you're probably not sleeping alone. Not just in the shared mattress sense, but in the you're surrounded by bodies sense. Some snoring, some mumbling in their sleep. One person with a wheeze that sounds suspiciously like a whimpering cat. Welcome to the medieval communal bedroom. The idea of a private sleeping chamber was a luxury one enjoyed by nobles, lords, and the occasional well-to-do merchant. With a taste for solitude, for the rest of us, the bedroom was a multi-use space. A human burrito of family, noise, and body heat. And honestly, it kind of worked. At night, people slept in clusters, parents, children, siblings, and sometimes guests. There wasn't room to spread out, nor the insulation to survive alone. A warm body next to you could mean the difference between comfort and waking up with frost in your eyebrows. There are historical accounts of entire households, sometimes 2 or 3 generations, bedding down in one room, sometimes even in one large bed. A 15th century inventory from rural France lists a great bed for all the family, with woolen coverings and a shared pillow, as if that's just how it's done. And it was. Even in urban spaces where houses stacked upward and rooms were tighter, beds remained shared. Space was simply too precious, and warmth too necessary. Plus, it wasn't seen as odd. It was just sleep. Now, did this make for peaceful rest? Not exactly. Imagine trying to get your second sleep with your younger brother flailing beside you and your grandmother whispering psalms at the ceiling. You didn't exactly drift off. You gradually negotiated sleep like a treaty with several different personalities. Still, it created something modern bedrooms lack: shared rhythm. When someone stirred during the watch, others did too. When the candle lit, it often illuminated more than one sleepy face. When a dream was mumbled aloud, someone might answer. And when second sleep came, it rolled over the group like a blanket. You weren't alone with your thoughts. You were part of something. Historians still debate whether this kind of sleep fostered emotional closeness or just bred collective exhaustion. But diaries and oral histories suggest that people found comfort in the presence of others, even if it meant less personal space and more random elbows to the ribs. It wasn't all peaceful. Though, the bed was also where disagreements played out, where kids squabbled, where spouses argued in hushed tones so the children wouldn't hear. They always heard. Where secrets were whispered or not whispered enough. And in many cases, the bed was a stage for stories. Long before TV, podcasts, or audiobooks, bedtime was story time. Parents or elders might tell tales during the watch hour: fables, religious parables, family legends. Some were meant to comfort. Others were cautionary. A few were just plain weird. One recorded tale from a 14th century Yorkshire household involved a goose who outwitted a tax collector and then opened a bakery. No moral, just vibes. Some of the stories were inherited, passed down orally from grandmother to grandchild, refined over generations like bread recipes or passive-aggressive glances. And these weren't just stories for children. Adults listened too, especially in the dark, when the fire had died and the dreams hadn't started. You stir slightly, feeling someone shift beside you. A murmur, a breath, a scratch. No one wakes. Fully, not yet. But the bed has begun to hum with little signals restlessness before the rooster. The hive begins to buzz. And here's another thing. These beds, for all their chaos, made nights feel longer. You didn't pass out and wake up disoriented. You moved through the hours as a group, with gentle shifts, shared moments, and the warm weight of someone else's leg accidentally crushing your foot. It wasn't glamorous. But it was human. Of course, wealthier folks lived differently. A noble woman might have her own curtained bed, with servants nearby and embroidered pillows fluffed by hand. But even then, she might share her bed with a lady-in-waiting, or a sister, or her children. Complete solitude? Rare. In royal courts, bed sharing was also political. Sleeping arrangements signaled status, favor, and alliances. Sharing a bed with a visiting noble wasn't necessarily intimate, it was strategic. You were seen, you were trusted. You got the good end of the pillow. The church had opinions, of course. Always did. Clergy warned against inappropriate closeness during sleep, especially among unmarried people, or heaven forbid between same-sex bedfellows. But enforcement? Spotty at best. Even monks often shared sleeping quarters, if not beds, to conserve heat and space. Meanwhile, out in the countryside, people had bigger concerns, like not freezing, or keeping rats out of the bedding. So what if your cousin's foot ended up in your armpit? At least it was warm. And sometimes, rarely, but sweetly, these shared beds became something else. A space for lullabies, for whispered dreams, for holding hands in the dark, for remembering someone you'd lost, or feeling less alone in a world where illness, hunger, and loss were never far. The bed wasn't just a place to sleep. It was a container for life. And you, lying here now, blanket twisted, someone's snores fluttering in and out of earshot, are a part of that container. A thread in the quilt of shared breath and shared stories. The room is growing lighter. Slowly. You dawn. Need to move yet, but you could. The bed creaks. Not with complaint, but like it knows its job is almost done. The light continues to shift, sliding from soft gray to something closer to pearl. Not quite dawn, but close. You're still in bed, knees drawn up, blanket tucked under your chin like a sleepy turtle, trying to delay the inevitable. And around you, others begin to stir too. You hear a long, exaggerated sigh from your father, a sleepy cough from one of your siblings, a rustle of straw, a whispered curse when someone's elbow lands where it shouldn't. It's not dramatic, it's not coordinated, but it's happening. The second sleep is ending. And soon, the bell will ring. Ah yes, the medieval church bell. The original alarm clock. Only less optional and considerably more judgmental. Before smartphones buzzed on nightstands, and long before bedside digital clocks blinked angry red numbers into the dark, there was one thing that ruled the rhythms of every village and town in Europe: bells. You hear it now, distant at first. A slow toll, deliberate. One strike, then silence, then another. It's not ringing for drama. It's marking something. Time, yes, but also identity. Because in this world, time isn't divided by numbers, it's divided by bells. The bell you're hearing might be for lauds, the early morning prayer. It could be prime, depending on the local monastery's schedule. The naming and timing of the night watches and morning hours varied across orders, regions, even languages. But they always rang, and you always heard them. These weren't background sounds, they were events. Audible markers in the fog of your day. You didn't need to own a timepiece. You had one, cast in bronze and hanging from a tower. The first bell would have rung earlier matins, sometimes around midnight, then lauds closer to dawn. And as the day unfolded, more would come. Terse around mid-morning, Sext at noon, none. In the mid-afternoon, vespers in the evening, and finally Compline before bed. A full daily rhythm, shaped not by tasks, but by tolling dot, and in towns or villages with large enough churches or monasteries, those bells echoed across fields, farms, streets, and hearths. Even if you weren't religious, you lived by them. Because bells weren't just about God. They told you when to start baking bread, when to feed the animals, when to stop working, when to stop talking dot, and crucially, when to sleep and when to wake dot. In fact, for many, the bell that followed second sleep was the official start of the day. Not sunrise, not birdsong. The bell, that ringing was your cue to rise, dress, and begin. There's something oddly comforting about it. No decisions, no scheduling. Just sound, guiding you through the day. And at night, it was the same. During the watch, you might hear the bell for matins or nocturnes. Not loud, just enough to signal that this sacred hour had arrived. It gave the night structure. It turned a passive stretch of darkness into something shared. Historians still argue whether these bells were meant more for religious regulation or social cohesion. The answer is probably both. A monk in a stone tower pulling a rope doesn't think he's keeping time for a shepherd, but he is. Just as the mother in her cottage doesn't realize she's stirring soup in sync with her bell. She didn't ask for, but she is dot. It's worth noting that bell ringing was serious business. Monasteries had strict rules about it. Who could ring, when, how long, and even what tone the bell should strike. A rushed or off-tempo ring could result in a reprimand or penance. Imagine getting scolded for hitting snooze wrong by God, and the bells themselves. Massive, beautiful instruments, cast in iron or bronze, often inscribed with names or prayers. Some were tuned to specific pitches. Others just rang in that haunting, slightly imperfect tone that makes your bones hum. One famous bell in a French monastery was named Maria and said to sound like a sigh wrapped in silver. Another, in England, was so loud it could be heard 10 miles away on clear mornings. When those bells tolled, people listened. Even animals seemed to respond. Dogs would howl, horses would stir. Roosters, feeling personally attacked, would try to compete. For you, this morning, it's a smaller bell. Maybe a handbell rung by a sleepy friar in the chapel, or a rope-pulled tower bell with a slight echo to it. Whatever the case, it marks your moment. The sleep is over. The dream has ended. And now, the day begins. You throw off the blanket and swing your legs over the side of the bed. Your feet hit the cold floor stone or dirt or wood, depending on how lucky you are. You stretch. Your back cracks like a dry branch. A good sign. You're not fully awake yet. No one is, but the bell gives you purpose. It means you've crossed a line. From dark to light. From sleep to life. From dreams to chores. You glance out the window, just a slit. No glass, maybe a shutter or a bit of oiled linen stretched across a frame. The sky is pale now, not blue, not gold. Just the soft white of breath and mist and promises. Someone else rises. A yawn, a murmur, a whispered prayer. And all across the village, this is happening. Together. That's what the bell gives you. Not just time, but unity. A shared rhythm. A reason to wake up and remember, you are not alone. You are part of something ancient, structured. Ringing out into a world still half-dash asleep. The bell tolls one last time. And now, it's your turn. The bell fades into the mist. Its last echo is still bouncing off trees and rooftops as you shuffle toward the fire. Or where the fire should be. Right now, it's just a pile of ash and 2 half-burnt sticks, sulking in a bed of gray. You kneel and begin coaxing it back to life. No flint, no matches. You've got a handful of yesterday's straw, some shavings from dry bark, and a piece of charred wood that might still hold a little ember if you breathe just right. You puff gently. The ash glows faintly red, barely alive, but stubborn. Few more breaths, and you've got smoke. Then flame. Congratulations. You're officially up. But you're not alone in this quiet morning ritual. Somewhere nearby, someone else is stoking their fire too. Another hearth, another dawn. The village breathes together. This rhythm, the soft rise after second sleep, isn't dramatic. It's not a clanging alarm or a sprint to a train. It's a slow spiral into motion. Your first thoughts aren't about emails or schedules. They're about bread. Maybe chickens. Maybe whether that patch of mold on the wall has always been there, still wrapped in your undertunic. You poke the fire a few more times and reach for the kettle. It's not metal too costly. Clay, maybe. Or thick pottery, blackened on the bottom from countless mornings just like this. You fill it from the bucket. Cold water, rainwater likely. And you place it near the flame to warm while you gather yourself. Now, let's talk about what actually happened next in a typical medieval day. Because while segmented sleep was natural and sacred and all very dreamy, the moments that followed it were busy and structured. And, depending on your role in the household, wildly different. If you're a peasant woman, for example, you're not easing into the day with journaling and stretches. You're checking on the stew pot. You're pulling yesterday's bread out of the bin and slicing it for breakfast. You're poking your kids awake, combing their hair with your fingers, and muttering about how one of them smells like sheep. Again, you might need a new loaf if the flour holds out. Or stir up a porridge, barley, oats, whatever you've got. Maybe toss in a scrap of dried apple. If you're feeling festive, and if you're a man of the household, it's likely you're already outside, checking animals, or making sure last night's storm didn't undo your fence for the 5th time this month. You mutter about it, but not loudly. The sun's still not fully up. Maybe you're a servant, and the house you serve is just beginning to stir. You tread lightly. You open shutters. You carry buckets. You sweep embers. You try not to get caught yawning. Or maybe, and this one's rare, you're a child with nothing to do yet. You stretch out your second sleep as long as you can. You pretend not to hear your mother. You bury yourself under a blanket and hope to vanish. It doesn't work. Still, even among all this morning bustle, there's a sense of slowness. The day doesn't jerk into motion. It unfolds, and at the center of it is the fire. It's not just a heat source. It's the heartbeat of the house. Every meal, every moment of comfort, every flicker of light depends on it. People didn't let their hearths die overnight unless absolutely necessary. A cold hearth meant a cold house and a hard morning. That's why rekindling it after the second sleep was so important. It was like rebooting the world. And around that fire, conversations happened. Not long ones. Just murmurs, plans, grumbles. You might hear, "Henry's goose got out again. Going to the mill today. Dreamed of my father last night. He was wearing my hat." Not profound, but real. And somewhere in the midst of it all, a prayer. Not always out loud. Sometimes just a glance at the sky, or a muttered thanks as the fire catches, or the quiet habit of crossing oneself before the first bite of bread. The spirituality of the post-second sleep moment wasn't always grand. It wasn't a sermon. It was a rhythm. You woke. You greeted the world. You acknowledged something bigger than yourself. That something varied, of course. For many, it was God-structured, ever-present, a guide through every hour of the day. For others, it was something quieter, the spirit of the house, the memory of a parent, the knowledge that breath itself was a kind of morning prayer. Historians still argue whether these small spiritual habits counted as formal worship or just cultural reflex. But maybe the distinction doesn't matter. When you live in a world where death is never far, you say thank you in whatever language you've got. You're not saying, "I'm grateful for a new day." You're saying, "I'm still here." And that's enough. The fire crackles now, properly awake. The kettle steams gently. Someone stirs in the next room, your sister maybe. She's humming, off-key, but you don't tell her to stop, because this is the good part, the part just after the second sleep, when the village is still half dreaming and the air tastes like wood smoke and dew, when the day hasn't asked anything from you yet, when the world is yours for just a few more minutes. You hold your hands over the fire, let the warmth soak in, and think. This is how mornings are supposed to feel. The morning has officially begun, but it still feels like it hasn't fully decided what kind of day it wants to be. The light outside has turned from pearl to a washed-out yellow, and the mist that blanketed the fields is beginning to lift. You hear the lowing of cattle somewhere in the distance and the first wheels of a handcart groaning against the frost-hardened earth. And yet, your thoughts are still back in the night, because the memory of that strange rhythm sleep wake. Sleep isn't something you shake off. It follows you, lingers behind your eyes, makes the day feel quieter somehow, like your thoughts are walking through the world with a finger pressed gently to their lips. Maybe that's why some people chose to stay up. Because while most folks embraced segmented sleep out of necessity, there was one group that thrived in it like fish in moonlit water. Monks. Now, these guys took the whole night belongs to God idea and ran with it. If your segmented sleep was a quiet interlude, theirs was a whole symphony of sacred interruptions. Welcome to the nocturnal life of the monastery. In a typical Benedictine order, and there were many variations, of course monks adhered to the divine office, or the liturgy of the hours. This was a fixed schedule of prayer that divided the day and night into designated points of worship. Not casually, relentlessly. And yes, that included the middle of the night. You've heard of matins and lauds already. These were the bells you heard tolling faintly while you stirred during your own midnight wakefulness. But for the monks, that wasn't just background noise. That was their alarm. They didn't grumble. They didn't press snooze. They rose from their hard cots, wrapped in rough woolen robes, and filed silently into the chapel. Picture it. Cold stone walls, torchlight casting long shadows, breath visible in the air. A row of bowed heads murmuring psalms in Latin, half asleep, half awake, completely devoted. This wasn't about comfort. It was about rhythm, sacred rhythm. The kind that said, even while the world sleeps, we remember. And it wasn't just matins. Some monastic orders included up to 8 prayer sessions per day and night. Vigils, compline, lauds, prime, and so on. A monk's sleep was interrupted, intentionally, regularly, and with deep spiritual purpose. Was it exhausting? Almost certainly. Was it optional? Not in the slightest. But here's what's fascinating. Some monks loved it. They wrote about the peace of the night, the silence of the hours between sleeps. One 12th century monk described the night vigil as the time when the soul, unshackled by the senses, may walk beside God without distraction. Another wrote that he preferred the cold, tired prayers to the comfortable ones, because in that fatigue, he felt his body fall away, leaving only devotion behind. Poetic, sure, but also incredibly human, because who among us hasn't had that weird, holy feeling at 3 a.m. when everything is quiet and your thoughts stretch wider than they should? Historians still argue whether the strictness of the monastic sleep cycle was healthy or damaging. Some claim it led to chronic fatigue, hallucinations, and premature aging. Others point to the extraordinary output of medieval monastic communities, manuscripts, art, philosophy, and say, well, clearly it worked. Either way, it shaped not just the monks, but the entire world around them, because the sound of those bells, the flicker of those chapel candles, the low drone of psalmic chant in the dark, that filtered into the lives of villagers nearby. Some families timed their own wakefulness to the monastery bells. Farmers paused to listen. Widows whispered prayers in sync. Even those who never set foot inside the walls of the abbey lived in a world shaped by its hours. And in some cases, copied them. There's evidence that deeply devout households, especially among the nobility, organized their sleep around personal versions of the divine office. They'd wake in the night not to light fires or mend clothes, but to pray, quietly, privately, by the glow of a single candle. It wasn't about following the rules. It was about finding meaning in the hours between sleeps. And here's something charming. The monks weren't always perfect at it. Records exist of entire choirs of sleepy monks mumbling the wrong verses, of someone snoring through the midnight bell, of a novice monk once arriving at matins wearing his blanket as a cloak because he dressed in the dark and mistook it for his habit. Iconic. Even holiness needs a little nap sometimes, and so does the rest of the world. Which is why, after the sacred watch ended, monks too returned to bed. Just like you. Just like everyone else. They embraced the 2-sleep rhythm, saw no shame in rising and returning, waking and sleeping again. It wasn't broken. It wasn't weak. It was holy. It was human. You rise now from your stool beside the fire. Your hands are warm. Your thoughts are quiet. And maybe, just maybe, you carry a little of that monastic stillness with you into the day. That sense that you participated in something ancient. Not because you chanted psalms in Latin, but because you allowed the night to unfold, as it once did for countless others. You stepped into the dark and listened, and the dark answered back with silence, firelight, and second sleep. You didn't need a monastery to make the night sacred. You just needed to pay attention. The fire is strong now. You've fed it, stoked it, watched the flames climb into life like a creature stretching after sleep. And in the glow, you feel it again, that quiet echo of the night, still clinging to your bones. But not everyone had the luxury of quiet rhythm, because if your timing had been just a little different, say, if you were born a few centuries later, or in a place where shadows weren't so still, you might not have been sleeping at all. Not peacefully, not in rhythm. Let's step into a darker chapter. Let's talk about plague. Yes, that plague. The one with the carts and the bells and the cries of bring out your dead. The Black Death, bubonic terror, the great reaper of the 14th century and beyond. And what, you might ask, does a pandemic have to do with segmented sleep? Well, everything. Because when fear moves into the house, sleep changes. It splinters. It shortens. It becomes less a gentle rhythm and more a desperate escape, a hiding place. And in the era of plague, people slept differently, not just because their bodies were sick, but because their minds were haunted. Imagine it. Your village is quiet, but not peacefully so. There are no birds, no laughter, just silence and the occasional cough that sends everyone still. You go to bed after sunset, as usual, but your first sleep is shallow, twitchy. You wake often. You listen. You pray. During the watch hour, you don't light a candle to write poetry. You sit in darkness, asking yourself if your sore throat is a sign. You check on your family. You look at your skin in the firelight. Any spots? Any swelling? You pray. Again, not the soft, whispered kind from safer times. These are bargains. You make promises, vows, deals with any divine power that might be listening at 2 a.m. Historians note that during the worst years of plague, especially in the 1340s and 1665, people began recording more dreams, more visions, more nocturnal anxieties. Sleep diaries of monks, midwives, even merchants reveal a shared phenomenon. The night got louder. Not literally, but emotionally. One woman wrote of dreaming 1,000 dead sheep that spoke with her mother's voice. Another dreamed she coughed and spiders came out. Another dreamed of fire that would not burn out, no matter how much water she poured. Dreams weren't metaphors back then. They were warnings, omens, prophecies. If you dreamed something terrible, you didn't brush it off with a cup of coffee. You told the priest. You told your neighbor. You told yourself it meant something. And the watch hour, the once quiet space between sleeps, became a phalanx, battleground. Some filled it with rituals, prayer, confession, cleansing. Amulets were laid near pillows. Doors were sprinkled with blessed water. Herbs were burned, both for their scent and their supposed protection. Valerian root, vervain, wormwood smoked or brewed into teas to calm the nerves and shield the soul. And yet, sleep itself became elusive. It's one thing to rise in the middle of the night to light a candle. It's another to rise because your mind won't stop spinning, because you heard a knock, or thought you did, because someone 3 houses down hasn't opened their shutters in 2 days. Plague turned the night into something suspicious. The darkness no longer held quiet, it held possibility. And not the good kind, but still. People tried to keep the rhythm. Some clung to segmented sleep more fiercely than ever. It was one of the few things they could control. Go to bed early, rise in the middle, go back again, the same as before. Pretend the world isn't unraveling. It didn't always work. But it was something. And when plague came knocking too often, even the pattern of night changed. Beds were abandoned. Fires were left cold. Entire families moved outdoors, fearing that air inside was deadlier. Some slept in barns. Others dug shallow trenches near rivers and wrapped themselves in cloaks, trying to breathe anything but sickness. Rhythm shattered. And in its place came exhaustion. Some records tell of people who slept for entire days out of grief, or didn't sleep for days out of fear. A priest in Florence wrote that he hadn't closed his eyes for 3 nights, not because of duty, but because every time he did, he saw his brother's face. Sleep became something to fear, and yet, it never disappeared. Even in plague, people dreamed. Even in plague, they rose in the middle of the night, if only to look at the stars, and wonder how many more nights they'd get. There's a kind of resilience there, a quiet defiance, and eventually the rhythm returned. The bells began ringing again. Families returned to their beds. The fire was relit. The second sleep resumed. Historians still debate whether the fear of plague permanently altered medieval sleep patterns. Some say it shortened them. Others argue it only paused what was natural, what would return as soon as breath steadied. What's more likely is this: it reminded people just how fragile the night could be, and how much it meant when it was peaceful again. So you now sitting beside the fire, hands warm, face soft with dawnlight, are part of something precious. You lived through the night. You kept the rhythm. You dreamed strange dreams and woke again. And not everyone got to. The sun is rising now slowly, reluctantly, like a child being pulled from warm blankets. Light creeps across the cottage floor in golden stripes, catching on the edge of a stool, glinting off a pot lid, throwing your shadow long and soft against the wall. But before the village truly wakes, before the chores begin in earnest and the rhythm of the day takes over, there's still time for one more ritual. You pour yourself a cup, not of coffee, sorry, that's centuries away, but of something warm, something steeped, maybe even something bitter and strange. Welcome to the world of medieval sleep aids, herbs, brews, and bedtime potions that were meant to guide you into sleep, or gently ferry you through the wakeful watch hour without tipping over into anxiety or despair. You cradle the cup in your hands now, feeling the steam rise. It smells odd, earthy, a little like wet hay, a little like something your grandmother insisted was good for you, but definitely had a worm in it once. And that's because medieval night drinks weren't exactly curated by Michelin star herbalists. They were a blend of folk wisdom, trial and error, religious belief, and a touch of alchemy. Let's start with valerian root. This was one of the most popular medieval sleep aids, known for its calming effect. You'd crush the root, steep it in hot water, and gulp it down while trying not to gag. It smelled like damp socks, tasted worse, but it worked for some. Then there was chamomile, more familiar to us now, a favorite in medieval herb gardens. Mild, floral, safe enough for children. It was used to soothe nerves, settle the stomach, and lull the drinker towards second sleep. You sip it now, and it tastes like fields after rain. Or perhaps your household prefers lemon balm, known as Melissa back then. Sweet-smelling, beloved, and praised for its mood-lifting properties. Monks cultivated it in cloisters. Midwives brewed it for new mothers. A warm cup during the watch hour was thought to keep bad dreams at bay. Historians still debate how effective these brews truly were. Was it the chemistry? Or the ritual? After all, you could be drinking boiled weeds, but if you believe it's a sleep potion passed down through 12 generations of dreamers, it might just work. And then there were the stranger remedies. Poppy milk derived from poppy seeds, but not nearly as intense as opium. A few drops might be stirred into warm wine or honey water to dull pain or bring drowsiness. Children were sometimes given it in tiny amounts, especially during teething. Risky? Sure, but options were limited. Or how about lettuce tea? Yes, actual boiled lettuce water. Monks swore by it. Peasants endured it. It was said to cool the blood and slow the heart, creating a sleepy calm. You imagine sipping it now and wonder if you're relaxed or just deeply disappointed. Some households kept a pouch of dried herbs by the bed, sleep sachets, if you will. Lavender, hops, rose petals, marjoram. The scent was supposed to ease the mind. You'd hang it from the bedpost or slip it under your pillow. If nothing else, it masked the scent of sweaty socks and unwashed cousins. Others relied on ritual instead of remedies. Before bed or before returning to second sleep, they might recite a short prayer. Something memorized, passed down, like "Jesu, joy of my heart, Guard me from night devils and bring me back to dreams. Let not my soul wander where my feet cannot follow. You sip your drink slowly now, letting the warmth pool in your stomach. Because the truth is, it doesn't matter whether it's valerian or chamomile or just hot water. The act of sitting, sipping, breathing, that's what soothes you. In a world that didn't separate science from spirit, sleep wasn't just physical. It was moral. Rest meant you were living rightly. That you were at peace with God, with your neighbor, with yourself. So if you couldn't sleep, that might be guilt or a warning. Or worse, hence the herbs, hence the prayers, hence the tendency to sleep in twos, so there was always a second chance if the first didn't take. You wonder now, as you sip your final mouthful, how much of that has really changed. Sure, we've swapped lemon balm for melatonin. We've replaced prayers with podcasts, and instead of dried lavender under our pillows, we have apps that simulate rainfall. But at the core, we're still reaching for peace. Still hoping the mind quiets when the body stills. Still searching for a bridge between waking and not. You set your empty cup down beside the fire. The flames are low now, just enough to light the faces of the tensed. Others beginning to stir. Someone else pours a cup of their own. The scent of mint fills the room. A familiar ritual, passed hand to hand. And outside, the village breathes. Chickens cluck. Boots scrape on frozen ground. A child laughs. Someone sings softly, just a snatch of a song from long ago. You've made it through another night. With a little help from herbs and rhythm. And memory. Now, it's time to rise. You step outside now. The sun's just barely cleared the horizon. Its rays slanting low through the mist like golden fingers reaching for the rooftops. The thatched houses steam gently in the cold morning air, and the grass underfoot is slick. With dew, the whole village looks half awake, stretching, yawning, squinting into the light. But you feel different, not just because you slept, because you remembered the sleep, the rhythm, the watching, the waiting, the sipping and the sighing, and the flicker of candlelight on your face. The world feels slower now, like it's moving at the right speed for once, but not everyone's strolling through morning peace. Some people are watching the shadows, because in the Middle Ages, the hours between first and second sleep weren't just a time for dreams or quiet tasks. They were dangerous, not because of wolves or weather, though those were very real concerns, but because of what people believed walked the earth at night. Let's talk about witching hours and superstitions, because while you might enjoy the idea of a midnight tea and a whispered psalm, others believed that the space between sleeps wasn't just a pause, it was a portal. A liminal space where the boundary between the living and the dead, the seen and the unseen, the natural and the other, grew thin. And this belief? It was everywhere. In folklore, in court testimony, in the little protective charms tucked above doorways and beneath pillows. The watch hour was sacred, yes, but also haunted. Start with the obvious. Ghosts, spirits of the restless dead, wandering. Between midnight and dawn, you didn't speak their names. You didn't whistle indoors. You didn't look too long at your reflection in a darkened window, lest you see something else looking back. People believed that dreams during the second sleep were especially vulnerable to spirits. That the moment between waking and sleeping could invite visitors, especially if you'd left a door open, or a candle burning too long. You might wake and find the bed cold beside you, or a shadow too tall in the corner, or the sound of breathing that doesn't belong to anyone in the house. Historians still debate whether these beliefs were truly widespread or just echoed through certain regions, particularly rural areas, where night was deeper, silence heavier, and imagination unchallenged by street lamps. But across medieval Europe, references to nocturnal visitations appear again and again. Then there were witches, the maleficium, the ones said to fly at night, to meet in secret covens, to steal the breath of infants, to curse fields with a glance. And the time most often associated with their activity? Midnight to 3 Amorite, in the heart of your peaceful little second sleep sandwich. That's why protective charms weren't just for decoration. They were functional, like spiritual bug spray. A sprig of rowan above the door, a cross made of straw under the pillow, salt at the threshold, iron nails driven into the bed frame, not to hold it together, but to keep things out. Even cats, especially black ones, were treated with suspicion. One moment curled up beside you, the next moment accused of being a familiar. In folklore, it wasn't uncommon for a cat to slip out during the watch hour and come back. Changed, you scratch behind your ears unconsciously, just in case. Then there were the elves and nightmares, and no, those weren't just bedtime stories. Nightmare used to be more than a bad dream. The mare was a spirit, a pressure that sat on your chest during sleep, stealing your breath, whispering fear into your dreams. People believed you could trap it by placing a broom upside down at the foot of the bed or by sleeping with a knife under your pillow. Not recommended. Very pokey. Even the idea of sleep paralysis, what we now understand as a neurological event, was interpreted as demonic visitation. You'd wake during second sleep, unable to move, staring at the ceiling while something heavy pressed on your chest. It didn't matter that your cousin Thomas also had it. The conclusion was simple. You were being visited. Not all superstitions were scary though. Some were just odd. Like the belief that if you sneezed during the watch hour and no one blessed you, a piece of your soul could slip out with the wind. Or that drinking water too cold between sleeps would make your dream slippery and impossible to remember. Or that whispering a wish 3 times during the second sleep would send it up into the sky, tucked inside your breath like smoke. Charming, strange, harmless until someone got really into it. In one court record from 1487, a man was accused of summoning a dream wife during the watch hour by drawing symbols in ashes. He claimed she visited him 3 nights in a row, brought him advice about sheep pricing, and then vanished forever when someone lit a candle too quickly. Historians are still unsure whether this counts as magic or marketing. And yet, behind the whimsy is a deeper truth. The night was a mystery, a power, a thing to be respected. And when you break sleep into 2 halves, you naturally make space for things to enter. Thoughts, dreams, fear, meaning. In the modern world, we shut the night out. We light our rooms, drown our minds in blue screens, fight sleep like it's an enemy. And when we wake at 2:11 a.m., heart pounding, we call it insomnia. We tell ourselves something's wrong, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's your old self, the ancient rhythm of your blood, remembering that there's supposed to be a space between sleeps. A space for mystery, for stillness, for shadows that don't mean harm, but might just be waiting to be noticed. You glance over your shoulder now, into the cottage behind you. The room is empty, the bed is made, the fire is low, and yet it hums with memory. Candles, dreams, a touch of fear, and a rhythm older than fear itself. You leave the cottage behind, stepping into the morning like a swimmer testing cold water, hesitant, then all at once. The light is clearer now. Not full sun, but strong enough to show every dew-speckled thatch, every frost-edged leaf, every muddy boot print from someone who rose before you. But we're not done with the night, because while some folks were peacefully sipping chamomile or muttering half-sleep prayers, others were getting into trouble. Let's talk about night owls and legal scrolls, specifically the surprisingly detailed court records that survive from the Middle Ages. Because here's the thing. The hours between first and second sleep, they weren't just spiritual or domestic or dreamy. They were documented. And sometimes criminal. You probably wouldn't expect legal drama to unfold at 1:30 a.m. in a candlelit village. But the historical record says otherwise. In fact, medieval courts are full of references to people caught doing something during the watch hour. Not always sinister, but almost always interesting. A man in 1321 was charged with stealing bread from a neighbor's pantry during the night. His defense: "I thought it was mine." Highly suspicious, especially considering he also left his own bread behind. Either a terrible thief or a sleepwalker with good manners. In another case, a woman was found standing alone by the well at midnight, humming and scattering herbs into the water. The locals accused her of cursing the village's milk supply. She claimed she was just following a dream. The judge told her to stop dreaming so loudly. These weren't rare cases. Dozens of them exist. Petty thefts, domestic disputes, whispered conversations overheard through thin walls. And the time of day is often specified. Between first and second sleeps, during the midnight watch, beneath the hour of lauds. The implication: people were awake. Not all, not most, but enough. And when people are awake, unsupervised, half-tired, moving through a world lit only by oil and instinct, things happen. You walk now past a garden wall where someone once claimed to see their neighbor speak to the moon and then dig a hole for no apparent reason. No crime was committed, but the report still made it into the local record, possibly because the moon was new that night and the digger wore no shoes. One of the most peculiar entries: a married couple filed for separation on the grounds that the husband spent too much time wandering the lanes at night, listening to the wind, and refusing to return to second sleep. He claimed it helped him think. She claimed it made the pigs nervous. Historians still debate what these records actually mean. Was the watch hour a hotbed of illicit activity? Or did people simply remember it better? Those strange waking moments, etched into memory like wax under a signet ring? One theory is that witness reliability increases during that liminal wakeful period. You're alert, but not distracted. There's no sunlight, no bustle. Just you, the dark, and the sound of someone tiptoeing where they probably shouldn't be. Another theory: the night just makes everything weirder. You know the feeling. Wake up at 1:47 a.m. and suddenly the sound of your coat falling off a chair seems like a home invasion. The creak of the roof? Definitely demons. The echo of your own heartbeat? Might be your ancestors. Hard to say. The medieval mind, steeped in symbolism, took these moments seriously. If you heard someone whispering beneath your window during the watch hour, that wasn't eavesdropping. That was intent. If you found footprints outside your door in the morning and they hadn't been there the night before, possibly magic, possibly theft, possibly both. So local courts took note. They didn't laugh off the hour between sleeps. They leaned in, and not all the cases were about mischief. Some were about care. A widow accused of sneaking bread to her sick neighbor during the night. A boy seen carrying firewood to an old man's door. A servant who risked her job to sit up during the watch and read by stolen candlelight. Not everything in the records is a crime. Some of it is hope, because even though the night carried risk of gossip, of punishment, of wandering too far into the fog, it also carried freedom. Freedom from supervision. Freedom from expectation. Freedom to simply be outside of time. You imagine now what it must have felt like walking alone through the village during the watch hour. The ground hard underfoot, the windows mostly dark, a single candle burning here or there, and above it all, stars more than you remember, more than you can name. Watching. Would it feel scary? Or sacred? Both, maybe. And that's what makes this fragment of the night so powerful. It was never just sleep. It was a canvas, a corridor, a quiet invitation to do the thing you couldn't do during the day, whether that was pray, plot, whisper, or simply listen. You pass the old well now. The herbs are gone. The water still ripples. You wonder what someone once tried to say to it. You wonder if it answered. You've made your way back from the well, back past the garden walls and sleeping animals, back to your fire-warmed room. The light through the window is strong enough now to call daylight, though the sun still feels like it's rising on tiptoe. And as the village stirs into motion, you sit once more on the edge of your bed, wrapping your blanket around your shoulders, and think about all the strange advice people once followed, especially when it came to sleep. Let's talk about the medieval medical mind, because while the watch hour was spiritual, social, and often full of dreams and ghosts, it was also the subject of genuine medical discussion. Physicians, educated ones, at least cared about your sleep. And if you didn't sleep in a way they approved of, well, they had thoughts and leeches, but mostly thoughts. You'd go to a doctor in the 13th century and say, "I sleep poorly." And instead of asking how much screen time you've had or recommending melatonin gummies, they'd ask you about your humors. That's right, the famous 4 humors of medieval medicine: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. The balance of these fluids was believed to determine not just your health, but your personality, dreams, moods. And yes, your sleep quality. Too much black bile? You're melancholic, prone to restless nights and troubling dreams. Too much blood? You sleep deeply, but maybe too long, and wake sluggish. Possibly a little lusty. Watch out. Too much phlegm? You sleep like a rock and snore like a bell tower. Too much yellow bile. You're likely irritable, insomniac, and wake during the watch. Or convinced someone wronged you. Probably that guy who always borrows your scythe and never returns it clean. Medieval doctors genuinely believed that good sleep came from a balanced body, not just physically, but morally. And yes, that included sin. If you were anxious at night, check your soul. Confession might be the only prescription. Still, they weren't all fire and brimstone. Many physicians gave practical, if occasionally peculiar, advice. Let's take a look at some of their greatest hits. Avoid eating late. A heavy meal before bed would agitate the liver and cause wild dreams, which might explain why someone once dreamed their mother turned into a fish and married the village priest. Don't sleep on your back. This could cause the vapors to rise and smother the mind. Side sleeping was preferred, especially on the right side, to support digestion. Sleeping on the left was said to invite nightmares. Sorry, left side snoozers. No sleeping with your head facing north. This was thought to attract unwanted spirits and chill the soul. East was preferred, aligning you with the sunrise and supposedly with divine favor. Sleep with the window cracked. Not too much, just enough to let out ill humors, but not enough to invite in damp air, which was believed to cause joint pain and melancholy. Rub your feet with warm oil, especially if you struggled with sleep. A little goose fat or lavender infused tallow massaged into the solace was thought to ground the body and soothe wandering thoughts. No strong smells before bed. Incense was fine in prayer, but heavy. Perfumes or garlic breath were said to stir the blood and disrupt sleep. Your spouse might disagree, but the doctor was very firm on this dot, of course. Doctors didn't always agree. Historians still argue whether medieval medicine was genuinely helpful or just glorified. Guesswork wrapped in Latin. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Some advice was truly insightful, early understandings of circadian rhythms, the impact of food and drink, the calming effect of warmth and quiet, and some was, well, less helpful, like the recommendation to tie a small toad in a silk pouch and place it under your bed to draw out nightmares, or the claim that rubbing your temples with powdered emeralds could stop nocturnal visions. Spoiler: emeralds are expensive, and they do nothing. But what's most remarkable is that people wanted to get sleep right. They cared about how they slept. Not just when or how long, but what it meant. Because sleep wasn't just biological. It was a reflection of your soul, your virtue, your habits. And the watch hour? That wasn't insomnia. That was an opportunity to listen to your body and maybe your God before sleep carried you off again. Imagine trying to explain a modern sleep clinic to a medieval physician. So you examined their humors? No, we put sensors on their heads. Like leeches? No, electronic sensors to read brainwaves. To find the demons? Close enough. Even today, we talk about sleep hygiene, healthy routines, and resetting the fuzz. Body clock. We're not that different, really. We still chase peace at night. Still believe that the quality of our rest shapes the quality of our lives. Still fear the nights when sleep slips through our fingers. You lie back now, not to nap, but just to think. To feel the softness of the bedding, the low hum of the fire, the scent of herbs and ashes and wool. The rhythm is still with you. Your first sleep, your waking watch, your second drift. The candle, the dream, the whisper of something holy. You slept the medieval way, and maybe, just maybe, that wasn't so broken after all. The room has warmed now. You sit in its golden hush, watching dust drift lazily through the air like flakes of sleep that haven't quite landed. The house smells of hearth smoke, wool, and dried rosemary, a scent so ancient it might as well be time itself. And yet, outside this little cottage, the world is changing, because as comforting as segmented sleep may seem now with its gentle rhythms, its sacred pause in the middle of the night, its candlelit dreams and herbal tea there, came a time when people started to forget it ever existed. Let's talk about the slow disappearance of second sleep. Not all at once. Not with a proclamation or a bell toll or some medieval sleep consultant shouting, "You're doing it wrong." It faded gradually, like an ember going cold. And by the time it was gone, most people didn't even remember it had been there. But you can still trace its footprints. In letters, in journals, in poems, In the tired corners of old medical texts, phrases like "after first sleep" or "rose from watch to right" begin to vanish around the 18th century. By the 19th, they're nearly gone. Not because people were sleeping better, but because the world was waking faster. That it started with light, not moonlight or candles or rush torches, but gas lamps. Suddenly, cities didn't go dark. Streets stayed lit long after sunset. Shop windows glowed, taverns buzzed, and people began to push the night forward. Where once there had been room for sleep-wake sleep, now there was more. Evening. More to do, more to buy, more to watch. And slowly, the sacred watch hour, the gentle drift of the night, was replaced with entertainment. Then came industrialization. The factory whistle didn't care about your second sleep. It screamed at dawn or earlier, and if you'd spent an hour awake at midnight writing a love letter or sewing a button, well, that was your problem. Workers were expected to sleep all at once, 8 hours if they were lucky, less if they were poor, and the rhythm of the body ignored. Even farmers, who had once shaped their days around sun and soil, began to adjust. Rail schedules and grain markets waited for no dreamer. The clocks ticked louder. And then came the bedroom revolution. Glass windows. Heavy curtains. Soft mattresses. Private spaces. Suddenly, people could sleep through the night comfortably, alone, without children or chickens or cousins kicking them in the ribs. And once they could, they were told they should. Medical literature shifted. A solid 8 hours became the ideal. The segmented sleep that had shaped human rest for thousands of years was quietly rebranded as insomnia. If you woke at 2 a.m. now, you weren't a thinker or a dreamer or someone honoring ancient rhythms. You were broken. And so, the second sleep was buried. Softly. Without a funeral. Historians still debate how quickly this change happened. Some argue that rural communities held on to segmented sleep well into the 19th century, especially in colder climates, where winter nights remained long and electric light was slow to arrive. Others believe it faded faster, swallowed by the candy hum of machines and the spread of Protestant work ethics that associated long sleep with laziness. What's clear is this: by the 20th century, most people had forgotten. Ask someone in 1910 about segmented sleep, and they'd look at you like you dreamed it. Which, in a way, you had. Even as recently as the 1990s, when a few curious scholars began to rediscover the idea of 2 sleeps, it was met with disbelief. People chose to wake up in the middle of the night. On purpose? With candles? Yes, they did. And now, in the 21st century, as sleep studies multiply and society begins to question why we're all so tired all the time, segmented sleep is being examined again, not as a quirk of the past, but as a possible return to something natural. Some people, when left in complete darkness for 12 to 14 hours a day, begin to fall into that old rhythm again. 2 sleeps, 1 watch. A piece they can't quite explain. It's almost as if the body remembers. As if it was never broken, just rushed. And maybe you remember it too. Those nights when you wake at 2:30 a.m., not because of noise or nightmares or stress, but just because you lie there, wide-eyed, heart calm, not sleepy, but not panicked. You check the clock, you sigh, you think, what's wrong with me? But what if the answer is nothing? What if this is your watch? What if your soul is slipping back into its own quiet hour, looking for the candle you forgot to light, for the silence you forgot to cherish? You don't have to reclaim it all at once. You don't need to move into a stone cottage or sleep in straw or burn valerian root in a clay pot. You just have to remember that once upon a time, in villages now overgrown and cities now humming with light, people rested differently. They slept in 2 pieces. They woke in the middle, and they didn't think that made them broken. They thought it made them human. You're on your feet now, walking slowly toward the edge of the village. The road beneath you is packed dirt, still cool from the night, and the fields beyond shimmer with dew. A few birds call to each other across the hedges, sleepy, unhurried. You tug your cloak tighter around your shoulders and feel it again, that lingering softness from second sleep, like your body hasn't quite let go of the dream world yet. But as you walk, something new rises with the sun: noise, Not much at first. Just the clatter of a cart axle, a low bark, the crack of a wooden door opening on stiff hinges. But it's growing. And by mid-morning, this village, like thousands of others, will be alive with voices, footfalls, animals, and hammer strikes. People are waking. People are working. Which makes you wonder, what happens to sleep when the night is never quiet? Because despite the charm of candles and the hush of the watch hour, medieval life was not as peaceful as you might think. In fact, the night could be downright noisy. And that matters because segmented sleep doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in a soundscape. And in the Middle Ages, that soundscape could be a chaotic lullaby of creatures, clanging, and very opinionated neighbors. Let's start with the obvious. Animals. Everywhere. In the walls, under the floorboards, tied to posts inside the house. If it was cold enough, you might be sharing your sleep space with chickens, dogs, a goat, or even a donkey, especially in winter. Not because you're collecting pets, but because body heat is body heat, and insulation is expensive, and animals don't. Respect segmented sleep. Chickens shuffle and cluck. Dogs bark at anything that moves. Cows moo when hungry or bored, and pigs? Don't even get started. A pig's squeal can be heard across 2 fields and a minor political boundary. Now layer in the village life. If someone's awake during the watch, maybe tending a fire or walking to the well, they're heard. Wooden floors creak, boots thud, water sloshes in a bucket. You stir, not in fear, but in awareness. The night is alive. And then there's the noise from beyond. Foxes scream like tortured souls. Wind groans through unglazed windows. Thunder rolls over thatched rooftops with no insulation to soften it. Owls hoot. Wolves howl. Yes, wolves, depending on where you live and how well your fences hold. One woman in 1382 wrote that she woke from second sleep because the moonlight was loud. Now, that makes no literal sense, but you know exactly what she meant. The world was lit up, strange, eerie, bright enough to feel like sound. Then come the people. Not everyone keeps to themselves. Someone's always whispering too loudly. A child cries. A couple argues in the next room over something no one else can understand, but everyone can hear. And sometimes the noises are worse. Drunken shouting. A door slammed in anger. A horse galloping when no one should be out. These sounds pull you from second sleep, not gently, but sharply reminding you that the world doesn't always cooperate with the quiet. Historians still argue whether these environmental factors disrupted segmented sleep or simply shaped it. Was the watch hour necessary because of the noise? Or did people tolerate the noise because of the watch hour? It's possible that waking in the middle of the night was less jarring when you expected it, when your neighbors did too, when no one was trying to force sleep to happen perfectly. And that's the strange genius of it all. In the modern world, we work so hard to silence everything. White noise machines, earplugs, triple glazed windows. And yet we're still anxious when we wake, still haunted by the idea that noise equals failure. But in medieval times, noise was part of the night, part of the rhythm. You stirred. You heard the village breathe. You let it pass. And if you couldn't sleep, you got up and did something. Or just lay there and listened. You didn't fight it. You let it be. There's even evidence that some people liked the noise. One monk wrote that he felt less alone when he heard the wind rattle the shutters and the dogs bark across the valley. A shepherd once described the watch hour as my favorite hour because the world forgets itself and just mutters. That's exactly what the night sounds like. A mutter. Not silence. Not chaos. Just the soft in-between of dreams and waking. Of hearth crackles and hoofbeats, of life continuing even when the rest of the world is supposed to be asleep. You stop at the edge of a field now, watching the sun finally rise above the trees. The world is awake, truly this time, and yet, it's still quiet enough that you can hear the echo of the night behind you. The watch hour, the whispers, the way the roof creaked like a voice trying to say your name. It's gone now, but it happened. And the world remembers. You follow the path along the edge of the fields, morning light spilling across the stubble of last season's barley. The village is fully alive behind you now, people calling across fences, hens squabbling over spilled grain, the rhythmic thud of a hammer from the blacksmith's forge. Smoke rises in thin trails from chimneys, curling into the sky like lazy thoughts. But let's shift our gaze for a moment, away from the past, forward, toward the new world. Because as the sun rose on the age of enlightenment and candles gave way to gaslights, something shifted, not just in homes or hours, but in the very meaning of night. Segmented sleep didn't vanish because it stopped working. It vanished because the world changed the rules. So now we ask, what happened to sleep in the industrial era? The answer? It was no longer about dreams. It was about productivity. Factories, trains, coal, steam, time cards, whistles, these became the new metronomes. Night no longer belonged to silence, prayer, or watchful hearts. It belonged to labor. You imagine yourself now not as a villager beside a hearth, but as a worker in 19th century Manchester. You live in a tenement with 6 other people. The air smells of soot. Your mattress is stuffed with rags. Your shift starts at 5 a.m. sharp. If you don't show up, you're out. Not just out of work, out of food. There's no second sleep here, because there was barely time for a first. Industrial capitalism had no patience for ancient rhythms. It wanted you rested enough to work, but not so rested that you wasted time. 8 hours of labor, 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of something else. That was the ideal. In theory. In practice, most people got far less. Factory workers, especially women and children, often worked 12 to 14-hour days. Night shifts were common. Artificial light flooded the workspace. Candles and hearths had once nudged people gently to rest. Now gaslight overrode that signal. You stayed awake, not because you were naturally alert, but because you had to, and sleep suffered. Night became compressed, shoved to the margins. People were told that waking in the middle of the night was wrong, a sign of weak nerves or defective sleep patterns. Doctors stopped talking about first and second sleep. They started prescribing tonics. And blame. Historians still argue how deeply this shift was felt among working-class communities. Did some hold on to older rhythms in secret? Possibly. In rural areas, segmented sleep likely persisted longer, hidden beneath quilts and candles. But in cities where the lights never went out, the old rhythm simply didn't stand a chance. It wasn't just the work hours. It was the noise, the constant rattle of carts, the hiss of factory steam, bells, horns, whistles. Cities never fully slept, and neither did the people inside them. They began to treat sleep not as a cycle, but as an obstacle, something to overcome, something to manage. Sound familiar? And then came the clock. Timekeeping had always existed, of course, bells, shadows, water clocks. But mechanical clocks, since to train schedules and factory bells, enforced sleep in a way that no rooster or monastic chant ever could. You didn't wake when your body told you. You woke when the clock did. The very idea of bedtime became rigid. In medieval times, bedtime was based on light and fatigue. Now, it was set by expectation. You were told to sleep at 10 p.m., wake at 6 a.m., and if you didn't, something was wrong with you. You became the problem. Not the world. Not the schedule. Not the glaring gaslight or the clanging factory bell or the crammed tenement where someone coughed all night and someone else came home drunk. No, you were told, if you're tired, fix yourself. And so, people did what they could. They drank strong tea before work and warm milk before bed. They read articles about proper sleep hygiene. They tried to ignore the hour at 2 a.m. when they still sometimes woke, just like their grandparents used to do. But now, instead of rising to pray or write or dream, they stared at the ceiling and thought, why can't I sleep like I'm supposed to? The truth? They were sleeping like they were supposed to, but the world no longer allowed it. And so, second sleep, once a common part of life, once a cradle for dreams and whispered prayers and quiet night thoughts, was quietly erased, replaced by the demand for efficiency. The watch hour disappeared. The rhythm became a line. Straight, unbroken, inflexible. You walk now through a small grove of trees. The birds are louder here, the air warmer. You sit on a low stone wall and listen. To the breeze. To the world. To what's missing, because the night, once a sacred chamber between two sleeps, is now expected to behave. To start at 10, to end at 6, to never stir, to never question, but maybe it's stirring anyway. Maybe it's still in you. Maybe your 3 a.m. wakefulness isn't a failure. Maybe it's your body remembering. Not the factory, not the clock, but the candle. The fire, the quiet in between. You rise from the stone wall and begin to walk again. Slower now, not because you're tired, but because there's something delicious about this pace, this unhurried, drifting through space that echoes the drift of segmented sleep. A rhythm that doesn't push, that doesn't demand. And as your steps crunch softly on the gravel path, let's pause to look at something that feels both old and startlingly modern. Call dreams. Yes, we've mentioned them briefly in candlelit hours and whispered between prayers, but now let's open the door fully. Because in the space between first and second sleep, dreams weren't just stray stories your mind told itself. They were messages, visions, sometimes even warnings. In the Middle Ages, to dream in the watch hour was to brush up against something other, something meaningful. You lie back in bed, perhaps during that hour of waking, and the memory lingers. A woman in blue robes offering you a cup of water. A crumbling tower, a fox chasing you through the woods. These aren't dismissed as random firings of a tired brain. They're interpreted. Dreaming in medieval Europe wasn't private. It was public. Knowledge. A dream might be told to your neighbor, your priest, or even recorded in a diary if you were literate or wealthy. Entire books were written to help people decode them, some scholarly, others decidedly quirky. Take, for example, Critica, an ancient Greek dream manual that was translated and retranslated throughout the Middle Ages, or the Samuel Benielis, a popular dream dictionary that told you what it meant if you dreamed of teeth falling out. Someone will die. Flying, you'll soon succeed, or fish, possibly a pregnancy, but also maybe just ... Fish. Dream guides like these were carried around. Like early self-help books, half mysticism, half folk wisdom, all part of daily life. Dreaming of fire? Beware upcoming arguments. Dreaming of water? An emotional storm brews. Dreaming of a ladder? You'll rise in the world or fall, depending which way you were going. And in the quiet hour between sleeps, those dreams were thought to be more truthful. The watch dreams. You weren't yet fully awake, but not asleep either. You were in a liminal place, hovering near the divine, the supernatural, or just the subconscious working overtime. Monks often describe dreams during this hour as lucid or clarifying. They'd rise, write them down, and return to sleep feeling somehow cleansed. Historians still debate whether this was a widespread belief or something more common among religious communities. Certainly, monasteries placed special emphasis on dreams, especially those of saints. But even among common folk, dreams were taken seriously. Dreams told you whom to marry, whom to avoid, when to plant your barley, whether your sick goat was going to recover. It wasn't science. It wasn't rational, but it meant something, and meaning, after all, is what gives us comfort, even now. In the glow of phone screens and the click of alarms, people still reach for dream interpretations. Astrology apps, tarot pulls, Reddit threads titled, "I dreamed I was drowning in a library." Help. The desire hasn't left us. Only the structure has. Segmented sleep gave people a container for dreams. It wasn't just about the visions themselves. But when they came, you knew they arrived during that still hour. You had time to sit with them, to whisper them into a lover's ear, to turn them into stories, or warnings, or prayers. And now we jolt awake, tangled in sheets and half-thoughts, and swipe away our dreams like annoying pop-ups. But not you. Not tonight, because you've remembered. You've let the dreams arrive, slow and sticky as honey, and you haven't rushed to shake them off. You held them for a moment, maybe strange, maybe sad, maybe silly, but yours. Entire medieval manuscripts were filled with people's dreams. Some were ordinary lost keys, floods, weddings. Others were wild, talking horses, towers of flame, frogs turning into bishops. A few were prophetic. Most weren't, but they all felt important. Like the dream of a woman who saw her husband building a ladder into the moon. He fell. The next week, he was conscripted to war. Or the man who dreamed of eating hot coals and woke to find his home on fire. Coincidence? Maybe. But in the space between first and second sleep, coincidence didn't exist. Only signs, only clues, Only stories waiting to be told. And maybe that's what you need more of, not longer sleep. Not better sleep, but more space to remember. The dreams you've been dreaming all along. So tonight, when you wake, because you will wake, at some hour your body still remembers, don't panic. Don't check the clock. Don't assume something is wrong. Let the dream settle. Let it whisper. Let it drift back into the quiet it came from. That is your gift, your hour. Your second sleep awaits. The trees thin out ahead of you, and the path opens into a small meadow. There's a low wooden fence leaning this way and that, half swallowed by tall grass. Someone's sheep used to graze here, maybe still do. You pause, watching the wind move the grass like the slow breathing of something ancient. And you feel it again, that strange sense that time isn't a straight line, but a tide that pulls you backward if you let it. Let's let it, because before we reach the end of our journey, there's something else we need to revisit. Not dreams, not the fading of second sleep, but the people who still live by it. Today. Yes, really. In quiet corners of the world, segmented sleep has never entirely died. It lives on in habit, in culture, and in bodies that stubbornly refuse to obey the ticking of clocks. So tonight, let's meet the modern sleepers of the old rhythm. You start with yourself. Think about the last time you woke up in the middle of the night, not in panic, not because of a nightmare or an alarm or an unexpected noise, but just awake, calm, present. Maybe around 2:30 a.m. The room was quiet, the darkness complete. You lay there, eyes open, aware that you were in between. You might have called it insomnia, or maybe you reached for your phone and scrolled until your eyes burned. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't a malfunction. Maybe it was your body trying to remember something it lost. Sleep studies in the last few decades have shown that when modern humans are removed from artificial light and allowed to sleep naturally, often in total darkness for 10 to 12 hours a night, they spontaneously revert to a biphasic sleep pattern. One study by psychiatrist Thomas Ware found that when people lived in extended darkness, they naturally fell into two sleeps with a waking period of quiet alertness. In the middle, just like their medieval ancestors, that in-between hour was peaceful. Sometimes people prayed, sometimes they meditated, sometimes they just lay still. Occasionally, they felt a sudden clarity or calm that didn't happen during daylight hours. Sound familiar? Historians still debate whether this biphasic pattern is truly universal or if it varies between cultures, climates, and lifestyles. But what's clear is that many traditional societies still sleep in segments. In parts of rural Africa and South America, segmented sleep patterns are not only observed, they're expected. People rise in the middle of the night to stoke fires, check on animals, or chat with others doing the same. No one blinks. No one calls it insomnia. It's just life. In southern Italy, older generations still talk about la prima dormita and la seconda dormita, first and second sleep. Farmers in parts of Eastern Europe mention rising after midnight to bake bread or walk the fields, then returning to bed for their final rest before dawn. Even shift workers in modern cities, nurses, security guards, long-haul drivers report falling into segmented rhythms without meaning to. They nap, they wake, they drift. Their bodies carve sleep into shapes the world never asked for. It's as though second sleep is a default setting, still humming in the background. Overwritten, but never deleted. And then there are the hobbyists, the people who have reclaimed segmented sleep on purpose. You might find them on sleep forums, sharing charts and journals, or in online communities for lucid dreaming and polyphasic sleep experiments. Some use the wakeful hour for creative work, writing, painting, composing. Others use it for meditation, tea, or simply sitting. They report strange benefits, more vivid dreams, a deeper sense of rest, a feeling that time slows down, even just for a while. Not everyone thrives on this pattern. Some people try it and give up within a week, frustrated by the awkward wakefulness. Others never quite manage the return to second sleep and find themselves groggy all day. But for a few, it fits like a key in an old lock. You imagine one of them. Now a young writer in Kyoto. She rises at 2 a.m., not with a groan but with anticipation. She lights a single lamp, makes green tea, and writes with the steady hush of the city asleep around her. At 3:30, she returns to bed. Her second sleep is short, deep, dream-rich. She tells no one. They wouldn't understand, and why should they? This isn't a lifestyle trend. It's a secret rhythm, a personal ritual, a whispered inheritance from people who lived before screens, before caffeine, before the idea that sleep was supposed to be convenient. Maybe you're one of them, or maybe you could be. The next time you wake in the dark, don't fight it. Don't label it. Just listen. If it's quiet, let it stay quiet. If it's restless, rise gently. Brew something warm. Red. Something soft. Let the world move slower than usual. It's not productivity. It's not insomnia. It's just a memory. Your body remembering. Your ancestors whispering. The past reaching forward like a hand in the dark, saying, you're right on time. You're walking again, but slower now, as if each step presses gently into the past. The sun is climbing, but not yet overhead. The light is gold, the shadows long. You've left the village behind completely. The road has become a trail, and the world has narrowed into birdsong and wind in the grass. Let's go even further. Back. Before medieval candles, before cloistered monks and night vigils, before chimneys and thatched roofs. Because segmented sleep may feel medieval, but it might actually be prehistoric. That's right. We're talking caves, fires, and dreams that flicker like shadows on a rock wall. Because as odd as second sleep might seem to us now, there's reason to believe it isn't just a quirk of medieval culture. It may be human nature. Let's sit by that idea a moment. Imagine yourself not as a peasant or a monk, but as a member of a small prehistoric band. You've eaten your fill of roots and roasted hair. The sun has long gone. The fire crackles in a circle of stone. A few people snore already. Others stare at the flames in silence. You lie on your side near the outer edge, wrapped in animal skins, breathing in smoke and cold night air. You fall asleep quickly, but then you wake. It's not full alertness. Just that floaty awareness again. You turn onto your back. You see stars through the hole in the thatch or the trees above. You hear a rustle nearby. Not danger, just movement. Someone stirs the coals. Someone whispers a short chant to themselves. You stay quiet. You listen. You let sleep return in its own time. It sounds oddly familiar, doesn't it? Researchers who've studied traditional societies like the Hadza in Tanzania or the Pirahu in the Amazon have noticed that sleep there is often distributed, not consolidated. People nap when they need to, rise when they want to, and sleep in phases, not strict 8-hour blocks. In fact, among some hunter-gatherer groups, the entire group is rarely asleep at once. Someone is always up feeding the fire, tending a baby, checking the perimeter. Not on guard duty, exactly. Just awake. Watching. And that makes sense. In a world without walls. Collective wakefulness is safety. It also means segmented sleep is less of a disruption and more of a design feature. Historians still argue whether prehistoric humans slept in formal first and second segments like the medieval model. There are no Neolithic dream journals to consult, but the evidence suggests that waking in the night has always been normal and, crucially, safe. It wasn't something to panic over. It wasn't a medical problem. It was part of being human. A biological whisper, which brings us to fire. Not just as warmth, but as sleep's companion. Fire changed humans' sleep forever. Not only did it provide safety from predators and warmth in the cold, it created light. And light, as we now know, messes with melatonin. You'd think fire would destroy segmented sleep, but it didn't. It enhanced it. Firelight is soft, flickering, reddish-orange, exactly the kind of glow that doesn't suppress melatonin the way white light does. It made people sleepy, not alert. Comforted, not jolted. It made the night longer, yes, but not artificial. People gathered near fire not to chase away the night, but to extend it, to fill it with quiet time, stories, songs, repairs, and then sleep. Then waking. Then sleep again. Fire didn't break. Sleep. It made space for it. And so, the night became sacred. Not something to rush through, not something to fear, but something to move through in phases, in layers, in warmth and watchfulness. You picture a small group now, seated in a cave somewhere, on the edge of a forest. The fire crackles low. One person naps. Another sharpens a tool. A third sings a lullaby to no one in particular. They all know sleep will come again. And that's the point. Night isn't a window that closes. It's a door that opens twice. Maybe more. And in some ways, we're trying to come back to that now. Through nap culture, through non-24 sleep cycles among creatives, through flexible work hours and midnight, journaling sessions and 3 a.m. yoga videos with suspiciously high view counts. We think we're being weird, but maybe we're being ancestral. You reach a fallen log and sit. The breeze carries the faint smell of wood smoke from somewhere behind. Your fingers touch the bark beside you, rough, warm in the sun. And you realize something. You're not just walking through history. You're carrying it. In your breath, in your rhythms, in the part of you that still wakes in the dark and feels calm, not afraid. The part of you that knows sleep isn't supposed to be a prison. It's a path. And tonight, you'll walk it again. Maybe more than once. You rise from the log, brushing your hands on your thighs, and start walking again. There's no rush. The day is still soft around the edges, like the world hasn't made up its mind yet whether to hum or to whisper. And somewhere in that hush, you begin to wonder if we used to sleep in 2 parts. How did we lose it so easily? We've touched on the factories, the clocks, the endless chase for productivity. But there's another piece of this story, one we haven't looked at quite so closely yet. The invention of artificial light. Not firelight, not candles. But the real game changer. Electricity. Let's rewind a little. It's the late 19th century. Cities are growing, gas lamps are hissing, and people are beginning to stay up later, not because they're reading by candlelight, but because the streets themselves are glowing. First in scattered lamps, then in blocks, then in entire neighborhoods. Electricity begins as a marvel, a luxury, a wonder. But soon, it's everywhere. And when Edison's incandescent bulb arrives on the scene, something quiet but massive begins to shift. Night stops being dark. That might not sound revolutionary, but it is. For most of human history, darkness meant rest. It meant retreat. You couldn't plow a field, build a roof, or even walk far safely once the sun went down. But now you could press a switch and pretend it was still day. And people did. Shops stayed open later. Families gathered around bright parlor lamps. People read novels, played cards, wrote letters. Children stopped going to bed right after supper. Night wasn't a sacred pause anymore. It was extra time. And sleep had to move over. Historians still debate how quickly this shift affected sleep habits. In rural areas, second sleep likely persisted well into the 20th century. But in cities, the change was swift. Electric light encouraged people to delay sleep, and once they went to bed, they wanted to stay there. 1 block. No interruptions. The idea of waking up at 2 a.m. to pray or journal now sounded bizarre. Unproductive. Even suspicious. Doctors began treating midnight waking as a disorder. Entire shelves of sleep aids appeared. Tonics, pills, nervous cures. Suddenly, a perfectly natural pause between 2 halves of sleep was something to be fixed, and this is where we start blaming ourselves. You know the feeling. You wake up in the middle of the night, and your first thought is, something's wrong. Why? Because we've been told that waking is failure, that broken sleep is bad sleep, that you are broken if you can't stay down for a full 8 hours. But here's the twist. That 8-hour rule? It's not ancient wisdom. It's marketing. Clean, neat, sellable idea. One size fits all. 8 hours, 1 chunk, preferably between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Anything else? Call your doctor. But nature doesn't move in neat blocks. And neither do you. Because even now, even with phones and caffeine and artificial light burning into the early hours, the body still whispers the old rhythm. It's why some people wake without alarms. Why some people hit a wall at 2 p.m. no matter how much coffee they drink. Why that strange 3 a.m. clarity still visits without warning. It's the old pattern, trying to resurface, trying to breathe. You walk past a weathered milestone on the side of the path half buried in grass. The numbers eroded. You think of all the miles people walked before clocks, before alarms, before Google Calendar. They walked by moonlight, by firelight, and sometimes by instinct. They rose when it felt right. They slept when the darkness grew too deep. And they woke again, afraid to sit with the silence before the next wave of sleep carried them off. So, how did we forget? Maybe we didn single quotes t. Maybe we just covered it up. With bright bulbs and sleep apps and prescriptions and podcasts about optimizing RAM cycles. But the rhythm? Still there. Underneath. Waiting. You stop beside a crumbling stone wall and lean your back against it. The moss is cool through your shirt. A bird calls somewhere nearby. And in this quiet moment, you imagine turning off every light in your house, letting the dark return. Not all at once. Just enough. To see what your body does. To see if it remembers. Not because you want to hack your sleep. Not because it's trendy. But because there's something comforting in remembering that you were never broken. The world just got too loud. And you've always known how to listen. You push away from the mossy stone wall and begin walking again. This time along a narrowing trail where tree roots coil across the dirt like the veins of the earth itself. The sun is high now, filtered through the green canopy, but your thoughts are still resting somewhere deep in the night. In that hush between sleeps. In the quiet your ancestors knew by heart. Because now, as you walk, you start to wonder not just how they slept, but how they felt. What did it feel like to wake in the middle of the night and not be worried, not frustrated, not panicked, but at peace? Let's try to find out. Close your eyes for a second. You are lying in a small bed. Maybe it's straw-filled. Maybe it creaks a little. There's a single wool blanket pulled up over your shoulders. Your room is completely dark, but you know the fire downstairs has been banked and the dog curled near the door. You've slept for a few hours. And now you're simply awake. And that's okay. You rise slowly. The floor is cold. You light a candle. The wax smells faintly of bees. Your house is quiet. The village quieter still. You aren't alone. Others are doing the same thing in houses nearby. A few might be tending babies. Others kneel at the foot of their beds in prayer. Some may be sitting silently. Just existing. This in-between time has a name in your language. It means the watch. It's something your family has always done. Your neighbors too. You've never thought to question it. You might pick up your spindle. Or a book, if you're lucky enough to own one. Or you step outside, wrapped in a cloak, and breathe the damp, hushed night air. You might even see another light flickering in a window across the lane and smile to yourself. You aren't alone. You are just between dreams. That's how people felt about segmented sleep. It was normal, expected, even cherished. It created a pocket of time between obligation and rest, between the noise of the day and the surrender of deep sleep. A time to think, a time to be. One 15th century farmer wrote in a letter that his favorite part of the night was just after midnight, when he would sit near the hearth with a small bowl of warm ale, thank God for the harvest, and speak softly to his wife before they both returned to sleep. Another account describes a midwife in 13th century France who scheduled births around the wake period, claiming babies born during the between sleep hour came into the world more calmly, as though eased through by the natural rhythm of the night. Now, are these fringe anecdotes? Sure, historians still argue whether these practices were widespread or more common in literate Christian households. But across cultures, you'll find echoes of the same thing. Night as a layered time, not a single uninterrupted block. And that layered night gave people space to process life in quiet ways. Think about how rare that is now. Most of your waking hours are noisy, bright, scheduled. Even your rest has rules, sleep trackers, blue light filters, podcasts promising to optimize your bedtime like a business pitch. But what if the best thing about sleep isn't how efficiently you do it? What if the most beautiful part is what happens in the middle? That hour when your thoughts drift like smoke, when there's no one to impress, when no one's watching. That's the part medieval people didn't want to lose. That's the part you can reclaim. You reach a small clearing. Now, a wooden bench waits near a sun-warmed stone. You sit and stretch your legs out in front of you. The light dapples your arms. A bee wanders past, humming towards something yellow and alive. You breathe, and you feel it. That slow, Ancient rhythm. The one no light switch can erase. The one your rhythm. The one your rhythm. The one no light switch can erase. The one your light switch can erase. The one your ancestors carried quietly through firelight and prayer, dreams and stars. They didn't need 8 hours straight. They needed trust. Trust that waking in the night wasn't failure. Trust that sleep, like life, comes in waves. Trust that rest isn't about shutting off. It's about tuning in. To breath. To silence. To dreams. And to yourself. You close your eyes for just a moment. Longer. Let the past settle around you. Let the rhythm of two sleeps hum softly. Beneath the noise of modern life. It never left. You just forgot the words. But now you're remembering. Your eyes open slowly. The sun has shifted just slightly, warming one side of your face. You stand, leaving the quiet bench behind, and the path curves gently once more into shade. There's a coolness in the air now, like the edge of a breeze that's passed through a doorway you can't quite see. Let's step through it, because tonight's story isn't just about history. It's about you, your body, your sleep, your place in a world that forgot how to rest. But before you drift into sleep tonight, there's one more chapter you need to walk through. The cost of forgetting. Second sleep. Not just the cost in folklore or tradition, but in stress, in burnout. In modern life, grinding against a rhythm it no longer understands. It starts small. You wake at 3:14 a.m. You don't know why. You check your phone. The screen blinds you. You scroll anyway. Half an hour slips past. You feel guilty. You try to fall back asleep. You fail. Morning arrives like a slap. Coffee doesn't help. Your brain is mud. Your mood sours. And you wonder what's wrong with you. Nothing. Truly. Nothing. Because you weren't meant to be a machine. And sleep was never meant to be a factory shift. The Industrial Revolution taught us to fear slowness, to fear stillness, to pack every hour with usefulness. And in the process, we made rest into a performance, a skill, a scoreboard. Apps now rate your sleep score. Wearables tell you if you won the night. But segmented sleep? It doesn't perform well on graphs. It doesn't fit in 5-star metrics or productivity hacks. It's too weird, too soft. Too human. Historians still argue whether the modern epidemic of sleep disorders is linked directly to the loss of segmented sleep, or whether the real culprit is stress, screens, and synthetic light. But what's clear is that our current relationship with rest is complicated. We're told to get more sleep, and we're also told to hustle harder. We're told to optimize our nights, and we're also bombarded with noise that never ends. No wonder we're tired. No wonder the idea of two sleep sounds tempting. Imagine if you could wake at 2 a.m. and not panic. If you could rise, not with dread, but with curiosity. If you could light a candle, sip something warm, and say, "This is my in-between hour." That's the gift medieval sleep held. Not just in timing, but in tone. It gave people a window of grace, a pause between chapters, a whisper between obligations. And even now, that whisper calls. You hear it when you wake without knowing why. You feel it in those 3 a.m. thoughts that are somehow clearer than anything at noon. You glimpse it in the quiet hush of a city that's finally asleep. This isn't about throwing away your alarm clock or living by candlelight. It's not about quitting your job to become a 14th century goat herder. Although, honestly, that's never off the table. It's about permission. Permission to listen to your body, to trust that rest doesn't always look like stillness, to believe that waking up in the dark isn't the end of sleep, but the middle. And if you treat it gently, if you approach it with care, it just might carry you into dreams twice as deep. You step into a narrow ravine now, the sides rising gently with moss and ferns. Everything is quieter here. Even the birdsong has softened. You imagine this is what the mind feels like at 2:45. Dim, hushed, expectant, not quite asleep, not quite awake. But deeply, vividly alive. Maybe this is what we've been missing. Not just rest, but rhythm. And not just any rhythm, but one that belonged to us before clocks, before streetlights, before sleep became something to achieve. A rhythm that says, you sleep, you wake, you dream. You drift, and it's all okay. You are not broken. Your sleep isn't failing. You are simply older than the machines, and your body remembers. So tonight, when you wake again, and you will, don't scold yourself. Just listen. To the silence. To the rhythm. To the possibility that rest doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be yours. You leave the ravine behind, stepping into sunlight again. Though it feels dimmer now, golden, slanting, the kind of light that feels like memory. The path is smoother here. You can almost imagine the distant toll of a church bell. Or maybe it's just your own heartbeat, settling. We've almost reached the end of our walk. But before we do, let's visit one last corner of this sleepy old world. Not a monastery, not a peasant cottage, but something stranger. The midnight imagination. Because this second sleep, this quiet pocket of time, wasn't just for praying or checking on the faking on the goats or brewing sleepy beer in the dark. It was for thinking. Dreaming. Imagining things you wouldn't dare say in daylight. Writers used it. So did philosophers. So did ordinary people who'd never read a book in their life. They didn't call it creativity. They just called it night. But in that dark hush between sleeps, the mind loosened. You weren't just alert. You were unguarded. More than a few famous medieval poems were jotted down in what their authors described as hours between first and second sleeps. Scholars call them hypnagogic texts. Not quite dream. Not quite wake. Just the right amount of weird. And if you've ever had a strange, brilliant idea at 3 a.m, know the feeling. Some sleep scientists today call it the watchful dreamer state. A neurological liminal zone when the brain is relaxed but not inert. It drifts. It draws strange connections. It lets in things you'd filter out by morning. Historians still argue whether this in-between state was deliberately used for insight, or simply stumbled into by a society that hadn't invented midnight Netflix. But we know this. Some of the richest dream journals in early modern history date precisely to these waking hours. One merchant's daughter, in 1591, kept a candle stub, a scrap of parchment, and a tiny lead stylus near her bed. She'd wake, write a line or two fragments of poems, riddles, prayers, and drift off again. Her entries include questions like, is heaven shaped like a sheepfold? If I die in a dream, who wakes up? Deep stuff for 2:17 a.m. But that's the point. When you're half asleep, the world gets softer. Ideas you dismiss in daylight feel true, even noble, even holy. And that's what second sleep offered. A doorway into a world that wasn't quite real, but wasn't entirely imaginary either. You've probably wandered there yourself. The hour when everything feels closer. Your childhood. Your regrets. Your strangest hopes. You stare at the ceiling, but your mind is standing in a place that feels like memory and dream had a baby. Some people hate this state. They reach for melatonin, for a podcast, for anything to shut the thoughts off. But others linger. Because in that tender, glowing space, you are most yourself. No mask. No email inbox. No pressure to explain why you feel like crying over a shadow on the wall, or why your 5th grade friend just popped into your head out of nowhere. It's just you. And maybe that's what medieval people understood, too. That the night wasn't just a biological necessity. It was a gift. Not just to rest your body. But to free your mind. You step off the main trail now, following a narrower one, overgrown and quiet. The forest arches over you, and for a moment you can almost feel it, like your surroundings have folded into that same liminal space, half real, half memory. You move through it like a thought, at midnight. Soft, unfinished, welcome. The breeze sighs. A branch creaks above you, and you imagine some medieval soul, 500 years ago, holding a candle by a frost-ringed window, scribbling a line of poetry with numb fingers. They weren't trying to be a genius. They were just trying to make sense of the quiet. To name the shape of something they didn't have words for yet. Just like you. Because the night, however strange it gets, always wants one thing from you. To listen. To let go. To wander just far enough from the fire to see the stars. Not everything you think in that hour will be brilliant, but some of it might be truer than anything you say at noon. So tonight, when you wake and you might, don't rush back under the blanket of obligation. Let your mind wander. Let it write strange questions across the dark. Let it dream with the eyes open. After all, what else is a night for? You follow the path as it begins to widen again, gravel giving way to soft moss underfoot. The forest breathes deeply here. The hush is complete. Not silence, but something softer, a feeling that nothing needs to speak. And here at last we reach the final steps of our journey. Tonight, you've wandered through fields of candlelit sleep, through chapels and cottages, monks' chants and mothers' lullabies, through second sleeps and forgotten dreams. But now it's time to return not just to the bed, but to the kind of rest that remembers who you are. Because the truth is, no one ever taught your body how to sleep. It just knew, long before phones, long before pills, long before people tried to sell you the secret to perfect rest. In an audiobook with a 7-day free trial and 17 steps, you already knew how to sleep. 2 sleeps. 1 sleep. Naps stolen under trees. It was never about form. It was about rhythm. It was about being safe enough to close your eyes. And even now, the pulse of that ancient pattern still beats inside you. You felt it as a child, drifting off to the sound of a fan or a lullaby or a faraway train. You feel it now, maybe, in the pool behind your eyelids. That slow fade, that gentle surrender. So what do you do with all of this? All this medieval wisdom? This odd, dusty, candle-scented truth? Maybe nothing. Maybe you just remember it. Not to change your life, not to build a new routine, but to feel a little less alone when you wake at 3 a.m. To know that someone 500 years ago might have been awake, too, kneeling at a bedside, or rocking a baby, or whispering a prayer in the dark. And maybe they, like you, wondered why the world gets so quiet when it thinks no one is listening. Maybe they smiled at the moon and thought, now this is mine. So go ahead, let yourself wake in the night. Don't fight it. Rise, stretch, breathe, write something down. Light a candle, stare at the ceiling. Make peace with that strange quiet. And when you're ready, slip back into bed. Let second sleep carry you, like it carried millions before you, like it's waiting to carry you now. Because even in the noisiest century in history, sleep is still an act of trust. Trust in the night. Trust in your own rhythm. Trust that rest doesn't need permission. It only needs space. So tonight, give yourself that space. You don't need to earn it. You don't need to fix anything. Just close your eyes and let the story fade. The forest path disappears behind you now, like a dream that's already beginning to blur. The leaves hush above. Somewhere, an owl calls once, then goes quiet. You sit down one last time on a smooth stone, warmed by sun and memory. There's nothing left to learn tonight. No more questions to chase. Just a soft settling of the air, and the gentle tug of sleep curling, like mist around your thoughts. Let them drift. Let them unspool. Let the edge of the world blur a little. Maybe you're not on a forest trail anymore. Maybe you're in a cottage with a heavy quilt, or a monastery cell tucked against cool stone, or your own bed, the hum of the fan like a lullaby. Wherever you are, it's okay to soften. To feel your breath slow. To not remember the rest of this sentence. You are safe. You are tired. And that is enough. Let the candles burn low. Let the second sleep come. No alarms. No score. Just the soft pull of time carrying you somewhere gentle. And if you wake again before the morning, you're not broken. You're just human. You're just listening. And the night is still yours.